I'm Nick VonDubCast, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 18 minutes. But before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the VonDubCast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. All right. Welcome everybody to episode 56 of the VonDubCast. Very special episode for you guys today. We have the mayor of Slave Lake, Alberta, my hometown. Tyler was my mayor for quite a few years, kind of right after the fires, kind of when I remember him coming in there. He's done it for almost a decade now, and has done a lot of things for the community. We talk about politics on the small scale, on the large scale. This is kind of a funny one because, as you guys, if you've heard any of the other episodes I've done, I have quite the take on politics and the political system in the U.S. and in Canada. And I thoroughly believe that it is broken irreparably and that there needs to be major change that need to happen. But someone like Tyler that's in that political system, it's hard for me to, I want everybody that comes on this podcast to have fun. And this one's one that was kind of hard to nail down. Tyler's a really busy guy. We were trying to line this up for a couple months before probably. But I knew I was coming up for this couple days where I could get a few interviews in, and it was still tight timelines. I was, coming right in from GP, got there, got everything set up. And Tyler was over maybe within 20 minutes and we were getting rolling. So I hope you can't hear the stress in my voice of me trying to get everything. Oh, I couldn't get the mics working, and the new mics I brought, I couldn't get hooked up. So I had to go to the old stuff. It was just a nightmare right before this. So I hope you guys can't tell too much of my struggle, but yeah. So like I was saying, I wanted to, and then also I didn't know how much Tyler knew about the podcast, what he was getting in for. I never know kind of how much the guest, maybe if they've listened to a couple episodes, that's always, if they tell me that, it's always nice because then I kind of have a feeling that they know at least a little bit of what it's going to be about. But it became pretty clear that Tyler was a little unprepared, I think, for what the full scope of what the podcast was going to be. And I felt a little bad about that. I definitely was keeping him, he's a busy guy, right? Like it was hard to book it. And then, during the interview, I could tell he was still trying to, handle some stuff and be on his phone and that, cause he's got a business to run and that, and I'm thankful for him giving me that time. But it was, interesting for me to kind of navigate that because, and that's on me. 100% I need to do better of, making sure my guests are brought up to speed on what they're about to do and those types of things. But I think it was still an amazing episode. That's the other thing. I also was unprepared. I had a couple different ideas in my head. I think I had forgotten a couple things, how long it'd been since I'd talked to Tyler, so it's going to take a little bit of time to warm up. I forgot I was talking to a politician, a professional, right? Like it's one of those things where you sit down with people and usually with the podcast, it's 5-10 minutes and then it's blaster shields down and it's just a conversation. And Tyler does this for a living, and I could tell that. And it was a little bit different now. And it took me a little, I think I was a bit unsettled and had to settle in a little bit longer than maybe Tyler was. He seemed to kind of already be in and like he's done this a million times, which obviously he has, which I don't know why that surprised me, but kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. But it was really fun. So there were some parts, like I said, where my views on politics, I try not to hammer too hard, right? Like I say, I want everybody to have fun coming on this podcast. I'm not bringing anybody on to railroad them or hold their feet to the fire. But some of the ideas that I had, some of the easier ones that are pretty unoffensive, like ranked choice voting and, trying to give an idea of what the Unity Project, I don't even know if I brought it up. I assume I would. I bring it up on half the podcasts that aren't even with politicians. So I'm sure it came up at one point, those kind of easier ones, and then didn't push too far into what I really think about the political system and what it does to politicians once you get past that municipal level. And it was interesting to see Tyler's reactions to some of those probes, just to see if he'd seen some of it too. And I definitely think he understands most of what I'm saying. I think there were some times where we really connected and we were jamming and really coming together on those. And I think there were some big misses where, again, that's on me. I just didn't explain these things well enough clearly to help Tyler understand them so we could go down those roads. But at those times, I just backed off because, like I said, I don't want to push too far and make things abrasive on the podcast. So it was really fun. I tried to give Tyler a heads up before we got into kind of my views on politics and all that of what, for myself, like, where I come from in kind of a little Cole's Notes version. You'll probably hear that in the podcast of just me before I dive into some of it, just because I was worried. I didn't want it to feel like I was attacking him. I didn't want it to feel like he was coming into this, like not knowing what it was, doing me a favor, busy guy coming in, and then me coming in and say, all politicians are bad and all this stuff. So I was really concentrated on that fact of making sure I was doing well not to do that. And I think I did a good job. But then it's now balancing. Now, am I true to myself in being too weak on some of those points and not pushing hard enough and not holding his feet to the fire, right? You know what I mean? Like in my own head. And I'm sure that you guys won't notice any of that, and it'll just be a great interview to you guys. But that was the kind of things that are going through my head. And that's why I give you guys a chance to skip these little intros, because sometimes I'm going to give you guys a little bit of behind the scenes of what I was going through with the interview and let you in, because I want it to be intimate. I want it to be as intimate as possible, because those are my favorite podcasts. And when people really let you in on what was happening in that room for that hour or 2 hours, whatever it is, that was the other part. I don't think Tyler knew how long it was. I think I could see the expression in his face, probably about 45 minutes. Like, how the fuck long is this thing gonna go? And I was like, oh shit. But the conversation was so good that I kept kind of hooking him in, and then I'd get him on a tangent, and you could tell like he was all in on it, and he'd be locked in for a bit too. And then we'd I don't know, change topics or whatever, and he'd look at his watch, holy shit, we're still here, kind of thing. So I tried to I definitely kept him longer than I think he thought he was going to be there. But hey, I gotta get my content too. So thanks, Tyler. Sorry I kept you a little longer. I probably wouldn't have done that to somebody that wasn't a Slave Lake native like me, and I could push the buttons a little bit or push the limits of what I could ask of people. And maybe I'm just being too polite. I think I always do that all the time, where I'm always feeling so bad about people giving me their time and stuff. And I just need to have a little bit more self-confidence in the time they have, because that's what everybody says. I always, beat myself up over what I'm asking of people. And then every time I finish these episodes, they say, holy man, I had so much fun. That didn't feel like 3 hours. I can't believe I thought that was 20 minutes. And everybody says the same thing, but I still get worried about it. I don't know why. It's just one of those odd ones. So, yeah, it was a great interview. I think I learned a lot. I think I changed my mind on a lot of topics. And I think also my understanding of what goes into politics at the most base level, and dealing with the pressures that comes with it. I think I have a better understanding of that. And I think it also, some of my thoughts on politicians in general. And again, I fully believe it's the systems that do this to the people. I think it's good people that get into these positions where the incentives are all bringing them to a bad place, right? I think that's how the system's set up. It's set up to corrupt, right? And it corrupts ultimately. And if you are unwilling to play that game and unwilling to be corrupted, you just won't go that far. You'll stay at the mayoral level if you're not willing to compromise yourself and take some money from some people and put some other people's interests ahead of that, right? And I think that's what happens. But at the municipal level, it's interesting, because I'm sure there is a bit of that too, and I'm sure there's some influences pulling at mayors of small towns too. I'm not saying they're innocent by any means, but it's cool to talk about things. Tyler's talking about it in sense of treating things like a family, not like a business, right? Like, or you also got to run it like a business. Sorry. The point I'm trying to make is that sometimes you got to piss some people off, and sometimes what's best does not make everybody happy. Oftentimes what's best doesn't make everybody happy. That's, I would say probably 95% of the time, if you're doing the real true answer, there's going to be a lot of people that are pissed off by it, but it's for what's best for everybody. And to keep that in mind, I feel like that's what falls off is you can do that with a town of 7,000 people and keep that accountability and keep that sort of thing going. But once you get into these where you're in charge of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people and their rights and responsibilities and what they can and can't do, you don't see what's best for people being done. You see what's best for whoever's paying them, whoever got them into that seat, whoever's in their ear, whoever's signing the checks. That is what happens. And it's the same thing, just on a different scale with different incentives, right? With different people that matter, right? Like the voice of the public matters less and less the higher you go, right? Like the prime minister doesn't care what other people think, he's beholden to so many more, lobby groups and big companies and all this stuff and all these other politicians that want to squeak their little things through and get, their thing for their riding and all this stuff. There's so much that complicates it, and it just is one of those things. But it gives me hope to have conversations like this that hopefully people can come up. I brought forward a couple of my ideas ideas for politics in the future and what can bring those sorts of accountability things that I truly think we need and are going to need for a long time if these things are going to be successful. I think the antidote to so much of this uncertainty and hatred and divisiveness in the States and in Canada all over the place, right, run through social media, is that accountability coming back. And I think you see it, that genuineness and vulnerability. And I think that is things that were almost run to extinction in so many areas, right? And now you see with podcasts and stand-up comedy, these coming back, people bringing back real genuine, accountable ways of doing things. And I think we're just going to see that be brought back into places that really need them, right? Like the places that need them most, healthcare, education, politics, all these places where you really need accountability and you really need genuine people that are trying to make good things happen and will put things in place so that they don't allow an option to be corrupted, right? You need to add accountability layers, because if you don't, it will corrupt. That is how it works. It's just, it's not anybody's fault. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It's how the system's set up. Unless you put systems in place to counter that and to enforce whatever you can to ensure that you can't be corrupted by those forces, it's going to keep happening. But I have a lot of faith that is changing. There's Tulsi Gabbard of the States that is starting a podcast, and she's a high level politician. And I think you see all these other guys, even like Ted Cruz. I'm not a big Ted Cruz guy. I mean, I don't know. I'm just not a big politician guy in general. I think they're all kind of backwards and corrupt. But you can see guys like Ted Cruz even understanding that and trying to put on his most genuine face. And you can hear it on some interviews. The only reason I know Ted Cruz has a podcast, if I'm honest with you guys, is because he had one of my heroes, Eric Weinstein, on. But it was a great conversation, and Eric, beat him up, and he was forced to show his mind. And it was the first time I saw a politician actually pressed and actually have to argue against a smart opponent. And it was really interesting to me. I feel like, why have I never seen like Biden do this? Why have I never seen when they show those debates on stage? That's so phony. It's not even an actual test of their wits. They all have their talking points that have been gone through 600 peer review groups to know exactly what answers are going to get this demographic and stuff. It's so phony. It's so fake. And that's why we don't trust these politicians. But then you see what happens when they have a podcast and they're forced to defend their ideas, and you can kind of see their decision-making processes, which matters so much more to me than the decisions that are made, the decision-making process. And that's why there's no accountability, right? Like when the COVID stuff all started and there's just all these rules coming out, and we wanted all, I shouldn't say we, all I wanted was to hear from them, what is going into these decisions? Like, what is your processes? And every day, Trudeau would come out of his cottage and read off a script and say nothing, dance around, just absolute word salad. I've never seen a bigger example of word salad than that, probably 2 months of him every day coming out and saying nothing. Like, all in all, like all those 20-minute press conferences, half-hour press conferences that he was late to every fucking time walking out of a cottage. I don't understand that. How can you want people to believe in you when you can't even show up on time to walk out of your fucking cottage door? Like, oh, that was ridiculous. But anyways, sorry, I'm getting away from my point here. But if you take like 2 months of those half-hour things, like that's probably, 8 hours, 10 hours of content of him sitting out there. He maybe said like 3 things of substance in that entire 10 hours. I think he deserves an award for that. And I'm not saying, this isn't like a Trudeau bashing. This is the system that is set up that allows that. That is what they're supposed to do. That is his best interest. That is a smart political move for him to go out there and say nothing. Nothing can help him at that point, right? Because that's what he values, right? If you value different things, if you actually value the people and giving them what they need and reassurances, then that would be something that he would do. But if you don't, and the system doesn't reward that right now, which it clearly doesn't, you're better off just saying nothing and letting us all scramble and letting these terrible rule sets get put in place, because nobody gets to question why they got put in place, because there's no accountability to answer any of the reasons why these things are being put in place in the first place, and asking what are the sciences behind and who they're talking to and why are these things happening. So now it just leaves a default where you don't have to be accountable. So now the only thing that matters is the numbers, it doesn't matter. The economy doesn't matter. People's mental health doesn't matter. All that matters is these numbers on your sheets that are, frankly bullshit anyway. But now they can just put as many rules in place that just defends them and doesn't take anything else into account. They don't have to say why they thought these rules up, and that's what happens. But I don't know. I've gone way too far. I don't even know what this has to do with this episode, but that's the kind of stuff that's what I'm sorry. You guys see how passionate I get. I just get on a rampage with this stuff. And this is what I was trying to hold back. I didn't want to, sit Tyler down and just fire hose him with this bullshit. Right. Like, and just lay him down with that. But, that's how I feel. And this is kind of, interesting. I hope to do more conversations like this with politicians of all levels, just to see how they see it, because it seems very obvious to me. And I think in this conversation, I could tell when Tyler knew this stuff and agreed and would have the politician's answer to it, but could see the problems. And then I think there was places where it didn't seem like he sees the same things as me. And it was interesting to, like I said, politely press on those and try to find out where. And like I said, I changed my mind a lot on this podcast, and Tyler opened up my eyes to a lot of things. But I think there was also maybe, if we did it again, I could maybe press a little harder and maybe open his eyes up to it, and just maybe get more of his take and his insights on them if I push harder into some of these areas, and maybe get some of his ideas on how this could be, tweaked and made better for the future. So I really had a fun time. Tyler was really generous with his time. Like I said, I know he's a busy guy, and I really appreciate him giving me all the time that he did, even if it was probably a little bit more than he thought he was getting into, like I said. But I'm very thankful for that. This was the first episode of this little series of a couple episodes I got to record in Slave Lake. Sorry about the audio quality. I did it in my parents' basement, and for my entire childhood, nobody ever went in that basement. I was the only one that got to use it. It was not renovated or anything. It was really old school 70s shag carpet and walls and all that. And then just before I planned this weekend, my parents decided that in trying to sell their house, they were going to redo the entire basement, and it looks amazing, but it's all laminate flooring and hard, and now it's just echoey as a bastard down there. So I hope the sound quality comes out okay. I think it will. But just this episode and the one with Travis and the one with Drew, they're all going to be in the same space. So let me know if the sound quality is really bad and you really hate it or whatever it is. Let me know, and I can maybe see if I can do some more magic on this end to fix it before it gets to you guys on the next couple episodes. So yeah, thank you guys. This is a bit of a longer intro. I'll probably put that in the description so you guys know if you guys want to just skip right ahead, but I think there's some good stuff in it as well. Thanks again to Tyler Warman. If you guys could follow all the social medias for the VonDubCast, sharing the episode posts when I post them really helps. I can always notice it when somebody new shares an episode post. I can always notice extra downloads, and that means a lot to me. It's one of those tangible things you can do. Subscribing so that it just downloads to your phone every time it comes out. That really helps. Even if you don't end up listening to it and you delete it anyway later, it helps me if you could do that. And then leaving a review. It's kind of hard to do through Apple and all that, but if you did want to go through and do that, that would be awesome. I mean, 5 stars hopefully, but if you want to give me a 1, I'll take it. But that's also helpful. And other than that, I probably have some more stuff to do, but I think if I have this much shit on my brain, I should probably just sit down and record a solo episode. So maybe I'll do that. Who knows? All right. See you guys on the outro. Bye. Start the recording, see if it's recording. Oh, as I start it, the battery drops 1 bar. I'll have to keep an eye on that. That's always fun. Beautiful. All right. Well, thanks for being here, Tyler. You've been the mayor of Slave for how long now?
I want to say about coming up 9 years or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How different of a job is it 9 years later than it was at the start? Has it changed a lot?
Well, there's a lot less charcoal than when I started. That's
yeah,
for
a
sure.
little bit. Hey, a little bit.
So I got into it. I got in politics in 2010. Mm-hmm. Always kind of, I'd done a bunch of stuff before then. Rotary Club, and was president of that, and did fire department, and it's kind of a natural progression. And it was something that I thought, hey, it looked like an easy term coming up and a great gradual thing to feel it out. So I ran for council. Mm-hmm. And then our mayor ended up stepping down before her term, so I took over for her. And right. I was thinking we're just coming up on 10 years, the anniversary of the fire here this spring, and so 8 or 9 years or whatever else doing this job. And it's a lot different for sure. It's like any job. You there's a whole bunch of stuff that you learn, and sometimes you learn a lot from screwing up. So it's nice to make less and less mistakes as time goes on, and
for sure, and
understand what people need versus what they want. And it's a really interesting job.
Yeah, I bet. And it's never the same. And something you just mentioned there that I was curious to ask about is that balance between what people want and what they need. Because I was thinking about that on the drive in. If you were to do just what everybody said they wanted, all your job would be is fixing potholes, right? Like that's all anybody.
Well, snow removal, healthcare, all kinds of stuff. You know, in fairness, the example I always use to everyone is we do some stuff with the school sometimes. So grade 6, they do a thing on municipal government, and so they always ask, you know, what's it like and what do you do? And the example I always use is fire hydrants. So if we got 10 of us sitting in a room, and I said, hey, listen, we're going to paint all the fire hydrants a different color. What color do you want? And 10 people in the room, I'm probably going to get about 14 different color suggestions, right? And so at the end of the day, some of those people are going to be happy and some of them aren't.
Right.
And so realistically, you know, it's not a job where you do what everybody wants. It's a job that nobody really wants.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they expect you to do the work. And so when it comes to that, there's a lot of decisions. You know, what are the costs? What's the supply? What's the availability? What's the long-term impacts and so on and so forth. And so you have to take all this information. And so I'm a big communicator. Like I'm really huge. That's been a priority for me all the way through. And, you know, so how do I take all those hours and hours and hours of meetings, you know, budget as an example, you know, we spend 80 hours on budget and I have to tell people in a minute or less, basically what we do, because after that, they're not really engaged and they just expect you to look after it.
Right.
So at the end of the day, you just got to get the information and make the best decision possible. And hopefully it's the right one.
Right. And that sounds very similar to my job, you know, at work. That almost is exactly what I found when I first jumped in and when I moved up to GP there and was into that role. It was something where I didn't really know exactly what I was doing right off the hop. Still don't know exactly what I'm doing, but that is what I found was the easiest thing. Is just collect as much information as you can, get all the inputs from people. You're never going to be an expert. That was the thing that I struggled with at the start. I thought I need to be an expert at the trucks and I need to be an expert at the finance, an expert at all these things. It's about having your experts in all those little roles, have them come to you, give you all the inputs that you can, and then make the best decision possible. And I found that was so clear, like a couple months in, that's what I needed to do. But it was something that nobody's ever taught you that. And it's such an important skill so I use that in everything now. As soon as I learn that at work, any big project, that's how I try and act. Like, what are all the inputs I need to gather? And what I found is as I get better in that role, one of the biggest things that's causing that is me understanding the inputs better and understanding what's more important, right? Like at the start, you might put way too much focus on cost, right? And sometimes you need to spend a little bit extra to get the right equipment, get the right people to make sure it works good and to balance those out. What types of inputs maybe when you first started did you not put enough stock into, right? Like, was there anything that you didn't have enough value for until you kind of got into the job and started to realize, oh, that's really important, and then started to kind of mold your decision-making through that?
If I was honest, I didn't put enough value in people that weren't just like me.
Yeah.
And so politics really opened my eyes to other viewpoints. And so I was very fortunate and I had the right personality that it fit, that I got to be my own boss very early in life and spent a lot of years being my own boss. And politics suddenly flips that on its head and I got 7,000 bosses.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm like every other business person there. When I first got into politics, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to change the world and fix all the stuff that's wrong. And you know what? We need to run the whole thing like a business, and you know what? We should have 7 business people. That's who should run the town. Like we'd have it all figured out.
Yeah.
That's pretty naive and actually really stupid, because when you get in there, you start to realize, you know, I don't know what it's like to be a senior. I don't know what it's like to be in a different income bracket. I don't know what it's like to be a single parent. And there's a lot of these things that come in that, hey, you know, it's been a long time since I remember what it was like to be an employee. And so I need to understand all those viewpoints and represent, because the box, the square that I live in is sometimes not the majority of where everyone else is living. And so, I think the best mix now is you don't run a town like a business. Actually, it's actually quite the opposite. You know, a prime example, we bought a camper, you know, a pull behind holiday trailer. I'll be honest, maybe I shouldn't say it on here, but I'm a cheap dude. I'm a really cheap dude. And so, I cringe the thought of it. My wife wanted to get into camping. We did it growing up, and I just thought, you know, this is work and whatever else. But like, I'm always about numbers and money and so on and so forth. I'm like, this is literally the dumbest financial decision that you can make. But you have to recognize in my family, it's not always about money. It's about quality of life. It's about quality of time spent together and whatever else.
Yeah.
And so
making memories, making traditions, right? That stuff is very important.
totally. And so I can tell you, like, we ran the town like a business. We wouldn't have arenas. We wouldn't have pools. We wouldn't have skateboard parks. We wouldn't have anything. We would just pummel out utilities, and it would be cheaper to run gravel and all of these other things. And so you start to realize that you need to run it like a family. And so there's things that we should have to make it better to live here, but there's a limit to what we can afford. And sometimes we got to say no to things, and you got to figure out the difference between wants and needs. But, getting back to your original question, man, this is going to be bad because I ramble a bit.
So do I. I go on tangents. Say that's what this is for.
Okay. You need multiple viewpoints, and it's very humbling to, I've learned to spend a little more time listening and a little less time talking.
Yeah.
Although we won't find that today, but I try to do that.
Yeah.
And there's always a viewpoint. Before you make a decision, you need to hear a few more voices. And usually the best decisions come from that.
Yeah.
Otherwise it ends up being your idea instead of sometimes a good idea.
And there's so many things that I want to jump in on. The first question I have maybe is in recognizing the importance of that, of seeing all these different worldviews. I think that's a really important point, not just for this. I feel like that is something that just people in general miss out on, is that understanding of the different viewpoints and that everything is. And I feel like lots of people come to that understanding throughout their lives, whether it's a new job that forces them to, whether it's a new hobby, something's going to force you to that understanding at some point. And then it's up to you at that point to, once you realize the importance of it, it's to keep putting yourselves into positions where you can see new outputs and find more and find where are your blind spots still. Right? Like maybe now you've really taken that senior and the different salary brackets into effect, but how do you keep looking for, and how do you keep up to date with those and keep your mindset open to all these new viewpoints and not getting stuck in the ones that you think you got it all handled, like you think you got everything in there, which we know is never true.
I'm an impulsive guy, so I have to really push myself to not make up my mind going into something. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
One of the benefits too, we're not the city of Edmonton, we're 7,000 people. So there's a lot of experts in those different areas that, and knowing those people and being here for so long, who to call to get some inside information, to get a different viewpoint. And, I think that's been hugely beneficial to me, is that I'm able to make those connections quickly, to get that information quickly. Because I also still want to make a decision quickly. Like, government, that engine moves at a very different pace.
Yeah.
That was a huge learning curve going into it. And I appreciate that it slows things down a little bit, because you have to collect some viewpoints. You have to collect some data. And a lot of the stuff you do, once you make the decision, like you don't change it in a month. It has to last for a while. And so there should be some weight behind what you do there.
Right.
But it's very interesting, after the fire, as an example, like you don't have time to do that. Like it's about boom, boom, boom. Let's get it done.
Yeah. And we got to see the consequences because of that. It wasn't anybody's fault, but you were forced into, you needed a house, you need to figure that out. And that's where we saw when things do move at that speed and not allow the speed that it needs. We got to see some of the contractors that came through town and the horror stories we heard, right? And that all comes from that fact of certain things take the time that they take. And sometimes the situation around it doesn't allow for that. And that's where you see these types of things. And if you ran a government like that, of just making decisions probably how me and you would like to, right? And have everything move at that speed, we would start to see those downstream effects that maybe we miss. Whereas if you take a couple more days of reflection, you'll see those hurdles, right? Like that's something at work where we do all the time, is let's really sit down before we make the decision and think of all the negative, what are all the bad outcomes that can come. This is something I do a lot when we're in our high level meetings. And it's so nice to be able to catch that one thing where if we didn't take that time, we would have ran smack dab into that hurdle, right? And tripped ourselves up pretty bad. But just taking that extra 5 minutes just to say, let's brainstorm on what could go wrong out of this? What could people, what could backfire? And it helps so much, right?
Yeah, there's usually more than one wall you can run into, and there's usually more than one door you can go through. So make sure you try and figure out as many of those before you do that. And so, I'm one that I think the thing that can kill you the most is if you stand in the mud too long waiting to make the decision. So there is a balance there for sure, but good ideas, good good plans. I always say ideas are easy and plans are hard. So the good plans take a little bit of time, and it should have more than one voice providing input and direction to that plan.
And would you say you're more of a plan guy or the idea guy, or a mix of both?
Oh, I'm a big idea guy.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
In fairness, though, you know what? I'm probably more of a plan guy. I'm a big logistics guy.
Yeah.
So when something comes up or scenario comes up, my mind instantly breaks it apart into 10 different steps that we have to go through to get there. How can I skip some steps? How can I move things faster? What are the things I need to watch out for? I'm really big about the plan. And so luckily I have other people that are good on ideas, and sometimes I have ideas too.
Yeah.
Lots of times they're not great ones. And so I'm fortunate that I'm a firm believer in surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And so I try to do that in every organization, in every company, in every lifestyle piece that I am, that if you do that together, there's a lot you can accomplish.
Yeah, for sure. And I found that finding good people is getting harder and harder to do. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but it seems like for me, every year, every job we post, the applicants that come in, it seems like it's harder and harder to find those people that are good idea guys or planning guys, right? Like it's just, I don't know what it is. It seems like there's a capability is almost on the decline. It feels like maybe that's just life getting easier. You got a phone in your hand doing everything for you. Maybe it just makes it a little easier, but I find that it's very, far and few between on those real, capable people that you don't have to worry about holding their hand, and you can give them a task and go out, and if they don't know it, they'll figure it out. They'll Google something, right? Like the fact that Google is so powerful, and so many times in your day you have to ask somebody to Google something, it just blows your mind a little bit sometimes, right? Of just those people that can't take that one extra step to try and figure it out on their own before they ask for help. And I'm just wondering if you found that as well.
Yeah, I've hired, running a restaurant, I can tell you, I hired a lot of people. I find it goes in hills and valleys. Yeah. For sure, things have changed. But, one thing I will notice in the last couple of years of my life is we spend a lot of time looking back and saying that's how people used to be. But on the flip side, I keep looking forward and say that's not how business works anymore either. Yeah. And so I think people require more than they used to. Yeah. But in fairness too, I look at our business, we ask a lot more than we used to too.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're very right.
And I can tell you too, as a parent, your patience level doesn't get better as you get older. So, it's something too that I have to recognize sometimes that, I used to put in more effort when it came to, training and developing that person. Now, because I've been more successful and I'm busier and I'm bouncing more balls, my expectations now of people have got higher too. So, I can understand and respect your comment, but I definitely think that on the other side, we've got some work to do too.
For sure.
That's part of the issue. Part of the issue is our expectations. Part of the issue is our effort. Part of the issue is our training plan. And a lot of times too, if you've been doing the same thing for a long time, you get complacent and forget to evolve your plan. Of course. Because the people that you hired 10 years ago were not the people that you hired now, and you shouldn't be training the same way.
For sure. I think that's, there's so many good things in there. I'm just trying to decide which avenue to take it down. But I definitely agree with you that in terms of expectations, just that one little thing you said about, what we're asking is a lot more too. I can see that just in the last 3 years that I've been in that role, right? Almost every position we have has changed exponentially, right? Like what we're asking about every year, every couple months, some new requirement comes in from these oil and gas companies of what they need on their billing or whatever, right? It used to be if you're hiring a fuel truck driver, all they had to do is build the shift, pretty much, right? They'll figure the pumps and stuff, they'll figure that out. These trucks are way different. They got computers on them now. Like it's all the billing requirements, things you need to know, like how you need to act on site, the safety requirements. It is a different ballgame. And you're very right that what we're, I think the baseline capability of what, these entry roles has changed. And then when you go up higher, there's added on responsibility at each level. And I think that is maybe a piece that I haven't been taking into responsibility. And you always got to be changing up your training schedule or whatever it is to help facilitate that. And maybe you're just not putting in enough in, right?
And you look at the last 24 months, 24 months, sorry, 12 months, COVID, right?
I know what you meant, yeah.
And the last 12 months, how much our businesses have had to change, how much we've had to change as adults or community members or elected leaders or whatever else, that adaptation is huge. And we thought it was huge before COVID started. So, I guess sometimes we forget that we got to put the work in on the back end too, that we're make sure that we're evolving all of the pieces, and not just the front end stuff.
Yeah. And it's so easy when you're working to evolve the system as a whole for one or two little pieces to get fallen behind. And now you're moving forward and you're putting in this work, but you're always, and usually it's that kind of scream test. You don't realize what got missed until it's too late. Now there's an actual issue that you need to fix. Whereas if you could have caught it 2 weeks earlier, you would have been able to switch some things around and make it work.
I was so focused on rebuilding the engine, I forgot to check the tire pressure and put some gas in the tank. Right?
Exactly.
And I think that's what happened. So,
and that's one of those things where, and then also sometimes you get, like you say, you get complacent. And you don't know what you don't know, right? Like coming in to this role in the business and having Ingo and Barry do it for 20 years before I got there. And then I'm this, why do we do this? Why do we do this? And sometimes they have to say, I don't know. We made that decision 15 years ago. I would love to tell you our decision-making process on why we price this that way, but we just don't know. And like, instead of getting hung up on that, it's just, okay, that happens with a company. You just have to understand that. What is the best way forward? And then you move from there.
And so then your mentorship is, well, go figure it out and make it better.
Yeah, exactly.
Catch you later.
But that was a huge thing that I had to learn, because in my head, Ingo was infallible, right? There's nothing he doesn't know, right? What I had created up until that point, that was a big learning lesson for me to realize that, no, he makes mistakes too. He doesn't know every aspect of the business. There's areas of the business where he has blind spots too. And to see that was a big change. I think that's probably every kid and their parent has that at some point, where they have to realize that superhero cape, it's obviously still there, but it's not infallible. Everyone has a kryptonite, and there's certain things here and there. And that was I think a big realization that was maybe holding me back in some other areas, because I think you hold certain things to a certain esteem when it comes from, right? If Ingo said it, I was holding it up to, like, it's up here. And I think I still have a very high ceiling for what that is. And I still take everything very seriously, but just backing that off one notch from infallible to right 99% of the time, just that is so much better, because now you're not stuck in these narratives that are concrete, right? Like if you for a long time, what Ingo's definition of success was the same to me, right? Like, successful business, making money, that sort of thing that he really values and was amazing at doing. And I still have a lot of that in me, but now once I realize that, there's other things that are more personal to me that I value higher, that maybe don't 100% line up with that. And I can still use all those tools and the years of knowledge of watching how he runs a business. I'm still going to use that. It's not like I don't want to make money, but there's other things that I value too, where maybe money's got to take a second or third slot to it to be able to, for the whole thing to work, right? Like I feel like I'm a big proponent of something where if you chase something passionately, the money will come, right? If you try so hard to make money on it, and I feel like this is for certain ventures and not others. I think maybe there's a couple businesses that you could run where this is not the optimal thing, but I think definitely in pursuits of passion, right? Like a podcast, like getting into art or whatever it is, something that is a passion that you're pursuing, that obviously you want to make money at it, but you're doing it for something else. There's a certain thing there that you're chasing that is
agreed, that
is more important, right? And I feel like that was a big learning lesson for myself, to see that as, everyone needs to have that talk with themselves and just check in what is meaningful to you, because I always thought like, oh no, this is meaningful to me because it's for me, and I never actually checked that. And then when I did have that moment of realization, like, oh, maybe this isn't exactly what I want. Maybe it's a piece of it, but it's not exact. But I'd never asked myself that. I just assumed, because, money seems great. All these little things that society tells you are good, they do seem good. And it was fun to chase them, but then you get there and it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And that was a big moment for myself of now, if to ask me, am I crazy? Is because everyone said, if you get to this place and you make this much and it's all going to be pretty good, is that me? Or is there something else I have to do? And I, luckily was able to find something. Oh, maybe I'm just doing what everyone said I need to do, and I need to find something for myself that I want to create, and I want to, put some passion behind, and that righted the ship a lot and made me feel a lot better about what I was doing. And I could still do my job effectively, but now I have something else on the table that also makes me happy and doesn't, drag so much out of you, because I feel like sometimes I was enjoying what I was doing at work, but there were parts of it where it was just draining me because I didn't have anything else in my life to refill it, right? Like there's certain times, certain meetings you come into and you leave it energized. Oh, we just made progress, right? We had really good ideas. Everyone was firing. That's awesome. But there's a lot of days where it's not like that. And I imagine in politics and running your business, you probably see that all the time. But I'm curious, as a mayor, what are those times? What makes it worth it for you? Like, I always use my podcast. I always say there's been a couple episodes, one with these authors, one with an MMA guy, and one with a comedian. And because I'm so passionate about those subjects and be able to have someone in that field come on, it was like, I can't even describe to you how much fun it was. And the smile on my face for days after, like that.
So like very different than what's going on right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, but that's the same thing. I use that as the high point example to show it. But even every interview I've done, I enjoy it so much. Like I could do this for hours and hours and hours, right? Like, and not even realize that time was passing by. Okay. And that makes it so worth it for me. But kind of what I'm trying to ask is, what are those parts of the job? Because I'm sure not the whole job is rewarding, but what are the parts that are the high points, the peaks, like putting a smile on somebody's face, seeing a new, maybe it was the MRC getting that open, because I know that was a huge push to build that. And there was a lot of, charity work that went in. Is there any kind of capstone moments that do that for you, or is it kind of low base level rewarding the whole way through?
No, like there are some moments, for sure. And lots of them are ones. So one, I will always say they're never immediate. Yeah. They're always stuff that you look back, and think, yeah, you know what? That was a big deal. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I spend a lot of time looking forward. I forget to look over my shoulder once in a while. That, when I do, I actually find it quite rewarding. It is pretty cool to walk by some of these buildings or things that you've created and done, and you look at it and say, man, like there is something that wouldn't exist if I hadn't been there. Yeah. No one will actually ever really recognize that it was you that made the difference. But yeah, there are some buildings or infrastructure there or whatever else that I walk by, and Legacy is a prime example, right? Like that building, it's a $20 million facility that, daycare and performing arts and a community space, and brings people together. I think it has just amazing potential. And I had to fight to make that happen. And so, I think that was a big one, but there's a lot of little ones behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about that, one time I had to reach out to healthcare for some help from a resident that called me about something. Her husband was in a bad spot. Had been in an accident in southern Alberta, and things just weren't going well. And just because of some other stuff I was doing and had a connection, I phoned, and said, like, can you help us here with X? And they were able to come through. And then when that wife called me, I was just crying on the phone, and so appreciative, and things were, her husband was getting better, things were heading in the right direction, and she was getting the access to the services that she needed, and knowing that no one will ever really know about that at all. Some of those moments are rewarding, but I will say that most of it is just stuff over time. There's a lot of stuff that you just keep chiseling away, and a lot of it too in government, like you actually never, you lose track of time of how much you've been fighting for something. Yeah. So, I think about, airport was another one, no, the stuff is stuff that we're not we're Edmonton International, but we got to do, $2 million worth of paving. And so, like, that's huge money. Yeah. So to give everyone a perspective there, if I raise taxes 1%, I net about $80,000. So to come out $2 million, geez, I'm a long ways off. Yeah. And so we were fighting for this thing. I'm talking to ministers and whatever else. I'm fighting for this thing for probably, 6-7 years anyway. And you go to another meeting and you just assume that, like, this is going to be another waste of time. We're just going to keep knocking on the door, and they're like, hey, good to see you someday, hopefully, or whatever else. And one day all of a sudden it comes through, and you're just like, wow. Yeah. Right. And it's a footnote. It becomes a footnote in everything you do, because now you just check that box and you're moving on to the other one, because you have 10 other boxes.
So many things on the go.
And you forget about it, and you're just like, hey, town of Slave Lake, we saved you $2 million, and away we go. But it's huge, and it's interesting to all of those time and effort that you put in that you thought was going to amount to nothing, and it actually amounted to something. And I'm kind of rambling, but there's a lot of little pieces that go into it, and it's just like, wow, geez, that happened. And it's so, I diminish the role because we just move on to the next thing. We forget to celebrate. And I think, honestly, people do that as a whole in life, right? Like we always
I'm really bad at that myself.
We forget to celebrate our accomplishments. We forget to celebrate our team's accomplishments. We don't toot our own horn enough. And, that's one thing I keep trying to get better at. Yeah,
me too. And I think it must be something with the culture and just kind of how we do things around here. And I think that is something that, I see it in myself. I see it in a lot of people around me. And that's just one of those things where
I think it's an Alberta thing, to be honest.
I think it might be an Alberta thing. Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. But and it makes a lot of sense, because that is exactly the mindset you're going to get into if you always have things on the go. And it's so hard to enjoy. I know I get that from every time I get on a bitching sesh with Ingo on the phone about work and stuff going on. So much of the time he has to, say, like, look what you've done. Like, look what you've come across. Look at these projects you've taken on, you've done. Like, and I'm so bad at it. And when he says that, you do take that moment. You're right. Like, that is pretty good, but it just, it feels like you got so many things to do that it's almost, you feel guilty celebrating anything, because like, why am I out here celebrating this big win when we got 6 more on the go that we need to put a lot of work into? And it's natural, and you're doing it, but it's still hard to, even when you're 100% aware and you have that issue. I still have a really hard time remembering to do it in real time, right? Like you say, every once in a while you'll have a weekend somewhere where you'll look back at a thing as a whole, right? The whole podcast the other day, it just released episode 50, and that was a kind of big moment. And, up until then I was very frustrated I'm really happy with the content and what's coming out, but just the pace that things are moving at, I want to build a studio. I want to be, helping other people start podcasts. I want it to be so much. I see so much of what's ahead that I hadn't taken a look back. And I think I was really getting down on myself about how far I had come. And then, you release a 50th episode and you kind of sit there and go, I've had some pretty cool people. I have some really powerful conversations, probably helped a few people, and you have that, but it's hard to do that in real time. I would love to get to a point where I was doing that on a more regular basis instead of once every couple months. But I think that's just a goal. We have to put it on your list of things to work on. It's
and actually where I struggle the most is my confidence level. My wife always jokes at you couldn't meet a more confident person than me. That my confidence level is pretty high. I don't need that, but I forget that my team needs it. Right. And so, I think people too that are in those leadership positions are successful because there's a successful team behind them. Nobody does it on their own.
No.
I've been really fortunate that I get some awesome teams that I get to work with. And sometimes I forget to do it for them.
Yeah.
It's great for me too, but we need to thank them because we didn't get there on our own.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big thing as well. That's always, something that I get from my employees is, some more thank yous would be good. And to me, I never got thank you, right? It's hard to put yourself in that because I never got thank yous, right? I never got a good job. Very rarely, spaced out every couple of years, you'll get a good job pat on the back, but that's just how we did things, right? And that's in you. But you got to realize not everyone is you, right? It goes back to that first subject we sung on. Not everybody is you. People need different things. And that is and even still, I've learned that lesson so many times. I've had people bring it up to me so many times and I'm still working on it. You know what? I've gotten over the last 3.5 years, I've gotten way better at it, throwing those thank yous out, putting the nice emails out at the end of a hard season, at the end of a cold snap, typing up something nice. But even still, day to day, like I have a lot of room to grow in there. And
I'll tell you, after 20 years, I still have a vast way to go to learn on that one. So,
and that's the important piece. I think guys like us, sometimes we get, too tied up on the end result, and just the fact that you're making progress in areas like that is huge, right? And that you're not being, because I think what the other side of that is people don't even want to explore that. They don't even want to look at where their faults are because that's a scary thing to do. And they just aren't even working on them. They don't know they're there.
Well, I think people too, like you touched on something earlier and I had it in my mind and I want to use it before we lose it. But the people think success is a straight line.
Yeah.
And it's nothing like that at all. And so, it was your comment, you were talking about your dad, talking about Ingo there, and, you look at him in Infallible, people don't forget that, that line to success had a lot of curves in it, some detours, some stuff that went back. And people need to recognize too that is the path to success. So if you're succeeding without any issues, you're not really succeeding.
Right.
And if you are having issues, you need to hang in there because you're probably on the right path. And that's usually where you learn and grow the most.
Yeah.
And so, don't give up, don't quit, don't get stuck in that little spot, man. It's just a detour.
Lean into what scares you. That was one of the biggest things with this podcast. I wanted to start a podcast for a really long time, years, but I was afraid. It's a big step to put yourself out there like that. And so many things that I knew that was what was happening. And then as I started, once I took that step and decided I want to do this and ordered all the equipment, got that, it's one of those things where my guiding post for what I did the next 3-4 months was just looking for things that scared me, right? Like I got pretty comfortable doing the interviews over Zoom, and I knew that. And I found myself coming up with all these excuses why I couldn't do in-person interviews like this. Obviously I had COVID, and that's the biggest one that made it really easy. But even when there was ways around COVID that I could make it happen, and I was still coming up with excuses, and I had to sit down and go, what are you doing here? Are you afraid? Yeah, you are, But as soon as I recognized that I'm afraid of something, I made sure I said, I need to book an in-person interview this week, right? And I took myself off. I need to get that comfortability because I know I can do it. But until you recognize it as something you fear, you don't know. Your mind is an amazing thing, and the excuses it can come up with that all make sense and are rational. But you need to. It doesn't matter if an excuse is rational. Sometimes it's still bullshit. Right? Because your mind's amazing at coming up with rational excuses, totally. It can never be more rational to you. Some stuff you rationalize yourself with all the inputs and all the information and all the power in your brain. If I tried to explain my rationale to you, it probably wouldn't make as much sense, right? Because it's something in my own head, and that is such a powerful tool. But to recognize that and know when your mind is playing that trick on you, and when something actually is something you need to pursue, or maybe that fear is for a good reason, and maybe it's a warning sign this isn't something. But I found that probably 99 times out of 100, if something scares you, that's where the growth is. That's where you got to pursue. You got to lean into that, and you got to
totally. I tell people all the time, you need to live on the edge of your comfort level, because if you just stay in the bubble where everything's comfortable, that bubble never gets bigger. You never change, you never adapt, you never grow, you never. Nothing happens. And so, I'm really big on pushing my staff, pushing my team, pushing my own kids. And my wife will say I push her, and sometimes she pushes back. But you have to live on the edge of your comfort zone.
You got it.
And the more you do that, the bigger and more opportunities that happen and whatever else. My daughter, we were out skidooing on the weekend, just two of us. We're in behind the house here up in Gloryland or whatever else. And she's not big on hills.
Yeah.
And so she's starting to learn, and took her to right behind Gordon Ferguson's place there, just before the trash rack. There's kind of a little steep hill or whatever else. And, after she came up and she did it, and we high-fived and did whatever, I told her, I said, like, Taylor, like, there's going to be lots of hills in life. And when you come up to them, like, you got to put on the gas.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you spin out, and you can spend a lot of time at the bottom looking, and you can spend a lot of time down there with a whole bunch of other people that are looking up. But like you said, if you lean in and put on the gas, put in the effort, put in the time, those hills are never, ever as bad as they seem when you're at the bottom. And
also on top of that is, now, once you start doing that consistently, now when something scares you, you recognize, oh, this is an opportunity. You get excited. And now fear is something that is a dominating factor. So many people live their life just trying to stay away from fear, right? And everything they do, every action they take is trying to stay away from it because it's uncomfortable. But now, instead of that, if you start leaning into it, that uncomfortability will turn to excitement. And now you've, by no other means but framing things in your own head, you've now made a world where nothing's really scary. Everything's just exciting. And that is a great place to be in. Your mental health will be better. Your outcomes will be better. Your success will be better. The capabilities, your ceiling lifts when you do that. And it's just so amazing for people to see. But just like all those other lessons, knowing that is one thing is much different than putting it into action, right? But that's the first step.
Well, and accept that it's okay to screw up. It's okay not to get it right the first time. In fact, I hope you don't get it right the first time. Because you'll probably make it 10 times better the second time. So people have to learn to be okay with screwing up. I think that's a lot of people. They have adversity. They make mistakes. They do whatever, and they spend a lot of time beating themselves up. And then they're too scared to try it the second time. But realistically, like, that's where the most growth happens.
100% it does. That's one of those things. And to see somebody like you, where you've always had a lot on your plate, right? Like, you're running a business and doing that. And just the fact that you always are adding on to that and finding new things. That's what I said. I think the first thing I said to you and knocked on the door, oh, are you busy? And just say, yeah, busy. But as soon as I feel like I wasn't busy enough, I added something else on, right? Like that's what you do. But I think that is important as well, right? Like, that was something where the last 3.5 years since I moved to Grand Prairie and moved into that role, it was some of the most challenging things I'd gone through. I grew an immense amount, and, kind of not plateau because I'm still learning so much. It'd be silly to say that, but that rocket ship learning curve that it was right at the start kind of leveled out a little bit. I was still learning at quite a pace, but I just found that there's not a lot of happiness in doing the status quo and just going in and having things move at that pace. And I feel like it's a good lesson to learn at, I guess I was 26 at that age. I think a lot of people go a lot longer into life without learning that lesson, right? And it's kind of a lesson everybody's got to learn on their own because, you know, I'd heard that. I'd heard all the cliches about, you know, money is and everything, all this stuff. But, you know, until you really experience it, those words are meaningless to you. You hear them but you only know them as, you know, those lessons that's for somebody else, right? Like I guess my own problem, and I don't know if anybody else sees it this way, is just, you know, like I'm too smart for those things. If it's a cliche, I won't fall in that trap. I'm too smart, right? That's always my head. And then I find myself, how the fuck did I get in the bottom of this hole? Oh shit, I guess I wasn't that smart, right? Yeah. And then you drag yourself out of that hole and you figure it out again. But I just found that, it's one of those things where it's all about just how you frame stuff. It can just change everything in your world, right? It's just about how you think about it and having a healthy mindset on it. And being another big piece of that is how you surround yourself, because it's hard to keep a good mindset when you're surrounded by people that have bad ones, right? Like you say, it's nicer for getting stuff done to have a good crew around you, but also just for your own personal growth and who you're going to be. It's a lot of reflection of who you hang out with and who is, you know, impacting your life. And I feel like that is one of those things where everyone talks about diet. Mental diet, relationship diet, everything is a diet. What you're taking in on TV, that's important, right? Who you taking in, who just bullshitting with on the weekends having beers, that's important, right? That
agreed.
It all comes back to it, and in the end, it's all feeds into the same thing of who you're going to be. And I think it's definitely getting more understood, and I feel like people are coming to that realization that these things are important. I think things moved so quickly. The internet took over, TV, and all this stuff was so quick in our laps that we didn't realize all these things. We're just now catching up in 2021 to, you know, the lessons we needed to learn to navigate 2006, right? Like there's
a bit of that going on for sure. Yeah.
Which is so natural. And I feel like people are so embarrassed by it that they fall prey to it, but nobody was prepared for this. And the entire world, we're all in the same boat here where we got, you know, slammed by iPhones, Facebook, all these things in a couple year span that none of us are prepared for. Some are doing better than others, but there's no sense in beating yourself up for it, and there's no sense in beating other people up for it.
Well, right? And you have to take moments like this. You know, there's a lot of similarities between COVID and the fire. I can tell you in my own personal life that, you know, there's this dramatic shift that happens. Your world is flipped upside down, and you have to adapt and do whatever. But it's also a great opportunity to take a moment and reset. You know, reevaluate. You know, what am I? You know, take a few minutes. What am I doing? Where am I going? You know, is this still important? Because it's okay if your goal changes. It's okay if you now want left instead of right. It's okay if you want green instead of red.
Right.
And so I will tell you, as time goes on, quality is always way more better than quantity. And so sometimes just slowing down and taking a moment to enjoy those next few steps rather than trying to getting through them as quick as you can becomes a lot more important.
For sure. And that's that's something that was very important for me too, was the COVID stuff. That was what took me to make that realization that I had to make a change. And I had to stop being a chicken and start this shit, because, you know, before COVID, there was so much that was happening. You know, there was so much I could pretend that I was getting fulfilled through work because things were going well. There's always little things. I always found that each year being in that role, I would get kind of burnt out towards the end of the year. And then in April of every year, we'd go on a national conference somewhere, usually Niagara Falls with Suncor and all the people there. And that would juice me up, because now I'm surrounded by everybody that's in my position, all the Ingos from across the world. And I got to be there, and we'd have these, you know, meetings. I get to, you know, speak up, and I would be in these little, you know, like, breakout meetings or whatever, and a couple people come up after me and say, "Holy man, you're really smart," you know, and then that would refill me, and then you go the whole another year, and then I'd be kind of burnt out, and man, I don't really like this shit, and I go to that, and you get re-energized with it, and then COVID happened, didn't get that, and I kind of I had to sit in those, instead of having that Band-Aid come on and just I'm good for another year. I got that rejuice of, you know, I'm doing this, these are all my my peers, and, you know, like, I came in this year after, you know, 1 year's experience, and I'm already blowing these old fogies away, right? In my own head, this is all, you know, my own bullshit. But then
there's a lot of bullshit in our own heads.
Oh, of course, that's all it is. But the important thing is, once you recognize that bullshit, you can laugh at it, right? Like I am now. You know, that was only 1 or 2 years ago that I was saying that, but now I can look back on that and realize the mindset I was in about that, and it's just so silly. But what was good about it was, you know, as depressing and tough as the first couple months of COVID was, that's what got me to this point. I had to get to a point where I was extremely depressed and in a really rough spot and really not enjoying it and not enjoying even the things that really made me happy. And I'd never felt that before. And it was really scary for me because, you know, I'd never, I had times, you know, like depression, so, you know, a breakup or whatever. But it's clearly tied to something, whereas, you know, you can kind of tie it to COVID and you know, that's pulling everyone down, but it was more than that. And I knew it was more than that. So I couldn't really shake up what it was. And I had to sit in that. And usually I had all these, you know, outlets, you go, you know, drink with your friends and all that, but you didn't have that during COVID. It was, you know, my girlfriend wasn't even in town. She was still finishing up her master's degree. So I was all alone up in Grand Prairie, which is, you know, was a lonely move to start with because all my friends are in Edmonton or Slave, right? It's all that stuff. But that's what it took for me to get down to that point to realize what I needed to move forward. And I think that's something where people oftentimes don't get to that point because they have all these things, whether that's, it can be a lot of things. I think a lot of times it takes the form of, you know, the bottle, you know, gambling, whatever it is.
Drugs, wherever you want to go.
Wherever you want to go. That's what, instead of asking those questions, doing those things, they dive into that because that shuts it all off and I don't have to think about that and I can reset. Now I got to go to work. I'll think about work. And then after that, I won't think about it because I go into that. And I feel like as much as it's hard to frame this whole COVID thing as a positive anyway, it's like, that's something personally that I could take out of that. I think I would have ended up chasing this dream eventually, but I think I probably would have lied to myself a couple more years and really kicked myself around and got to a really low point without this. But that was just kind of that throwing a little bit of kerosene on that fire to really burn it up and make it so that I was on that decision. Once I made that, it was actually that weekend I made that decision. I'm starting a podcast. I had shit ordered. I had all this. I didn't tell anybody, right? Didn't even tell my girlfriend. I just ordered a desk for my tail. I ordered the arms. I ordered these mics, the Zoom recorder, everything, right? Dropped $1,000 or whatever on equipment. Just said like, no, I'm all in on this. I know this is what I want to do for a long time. I'm going to do it. If I don't order it all, I'm going to check it out because I know I'd done that, right? But it's just about making that decision. I felt so much better. And then all those things at work, now they were reframed as, this is skills I'm learning for life that I can put towards anything, right? I'm not just doing this job for somebody else for, you know, Suncor to make money. It's a new way to frame it, right? And this is by making money here and supporting myself. Now I have the money and the freedom and the all else that comes with it to be able to do this podcast like I am, right? And just that little switch of reframing it towards that of now I'm not just working, busting my ass, doing all this, pulling my hair out so that Suncor can make a good dividend at the end of the year. Now it's actually something for me that's personal, that is important, that is chasing my passion. And that was a huge shift of just, you know, nothing changed day to day. I was still doing the same things, but how I went about it and how it made me feel was immensely different.
Well, mindset is everything. I always tell people, man, your Tuesday is going to be the same.
Yeah.
No matter what. The biggest difference between success and failure likely is your attitude. So people need to wrap that around. They spend a lot of time looking over the fence and wondering why things aren't good. And they don't spend a lot of time looking in the mirror. That just perspective is everything.
Yeah, for sure it is. Yeah. For sure it is. And you mentioned the fire, and that was kind of something I wanted to ask you about because you weren't the mayor at that point. You were working on the fire department still at that point?
Yeah, I was volunteer firefighter at the time, but I was on council. I was a town councilor.
Yeah, you were on town council. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was just from an outsider's perspective. I was in grade 11 during the fire. What I saw after the fire and the response, and maybe I could be wrong, but it seemed like everybody had an opinion about how things were handled. There was a lot of mudslung that I saw after. There was a time where there was a beautiful come together of the town. Everyone was leaning on each other. There wasn't a lot of that. And that lasted, month, 2 months. But then the mud started to sling. And for me as a kid watching that, I was like, none of us knew what we were doing. Like they're in an unwinnable situation. And it just kind of, I feel like that tainted me a little bit from the whole idea of, local politics of just like, man, if you can go through something like that, have that beautiful moment, people are still going to throw rocks at the end. Why would I ever want to go into it? And you got to be a part of that and see some of that. And then you still made the decision to dive in deeper. I'm wondering if you saw that, and maybe that was something that we got to see from the outside, and maybe those just the whispers that happened, right? Maybe it didn't make it. But knowing the town, I would imagine some people got vocal about it, right? Like,
we got to see it. I think if I probably looked, there might still be some mud deep in the pores there somewhere. Yeah. I had to recognize there was a lot of stuff. Like it was a lot of emotion that goes on.
Yeah, and you don't blame people. You realize what we all went through.
You have to recognize that this not only was this an event, the trauma that people went through that were affected, that lost their homes, but the trauma that people that didn't lose their home, but still had all those same emotions and sensations and feelings, and their coworkers and their the people that they work with and their students and their teachers and all those things. I don't want to devalue the experience for anyone else, but everybody went through something. And I had to recognize, I remember, my wife still jokes about this or whatever else, and joke isn't the right word, but a resident standing out in front of Boston Pizza there or whatever else, can I talk to you for a sec, pulls me out. And I literally stood out there for probably 45 minutes and, it felt like 4 hours. Just listen or lambaste the shit out of everything I've done or whatever. We have these town hall meetings afterwards there to kind of try and share information, what's going on. There's so many things happening so fast or whatever else, and we want the public stay informed. So we're having these town hall meetings, and there's a time where these people stand up and say, like, you guys suck and you should quit your job and you shouldn't be here, and away you go. And I remember one resident just telling us, well, then get out of here. And you know what, a couple days later, then sending a card and saying, I apologize and do whatever. I had to recognize very early that, emotions play a big part of this. And, I always say the dumbest thing you can do is make decisions based on emotion. Some of the funnest things you can do, even based on emotion, but there also can be some of the dumbest ones. And so, I had to recognize that people were just not in a great place, and that wasn't them, and that's not who they are, and that's not how they whatever. And you have to kind of distance yourself and just kind of put it off to the side and recognize that things will get better, things will change, people will settle in, stress levels are high, it'll come down, and the last thing your community needs, the last thing your team needs, the last thing your family needs is to get caught up in all that emotion. You got to kind of stay outside of that pot.
Right. And just to add to that as well is, I think some people may, it's hard to take yourself out of the current moment where trauma and mental health is in a much different place now, 10 years later than it was. It's much more mainstream. It's much easier to talk about. The taboo is very much still there, but is much different than it was 10 years ago. And people were going through that at that time. And also just a community of people that are very strong and oftentimes don't want to talk about their emotions in a certain way. And a lot of times anger is where that comes out. And that's how process emotions. That's how I process emotions for probably the first 25 years of my life. It was all through anger because that was the only thing I really knew how to do. And it's taken a lot of work to find other outlets for that maybe aren't so harmful, and maybe that was a poor example to ask the question I was trying to ask, mainly because it was such an extreme example, right? And like you talk about, there's so much understanding around what happened to help nullify that and make it stick less. But maybe, so I guess that was one where you got in there, but maybe even after, is it hard to deal with when you're doing everything you can, right? A situation completely aside from the fire where people still come back to you and say, you suck, you need to leave and all that. And how is that to deal with?
Well, I'll tell you that there's a couple times that I've had to make a decision that wasn't popular, that like people were not happy about. And I'm not going to go into it because it'll just create some other stuff or whatever else. But I will tell you that it's tough when you recognize that you've taken the time to get all the information, to get the other viewpoints. You have inside information that isn't supposed to be public information or whatever else. And so you have this whole ball of stuff that you can't share with people and justify why you're doing something. Yeah. And you say that, I know that this is not going to be popular. I know that people aren't going to like this, and people are probably going to think less of me because of it. But option B is the best option because it's what's best for the community for the long term. And that's a big eye-opening experience in government. You don't get in business that you have to make that decision. And I don't think every politician takes that. I think lots of them gear towards option A, keep everybody happy and keep them rowing in the right direction. But it might not be the best thing for everybody because they don't know the whole thing, right? Or they don't see the end game. They only see the first room before them. They don't see the whole house. And so I'm really big on you don't make the easy decisions, you make the right decisions, and for most part, it's paid off. But I'll tell you, navigating and sticking to that foundation, because that's one of my values. That's a core of who I am. Yeah. Those are the some of the toughest points in your life.
For sure.
However, I talked earlier about, feeling accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that you look back in time when the dust settles and think that might be the most important thing I ever did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I struggled with a lot jumping into that role. And this is somewhere Ingo is impeccable at, like the way he can let things roll off his shoulders, right? Someone could come up and say all those things we just talked about to his face and he will sleep fine that night. He's at a point where, and I think he's a lot less of an emotional guy than me. And I feel like that is something that is to my detriment in the business world, and I can turn it off. And that's what a lot of the things, when I talk about certain things are draining, I feel like I'm good at business and I can do it, but I'm a super emotional guy and I care so much about everybody else. But sometimes you have to make tough decisions like that, and turning that off and just being logical in those times, I can do it and I do it well, but it's hard. It takes a lot out of me to do that. And I feel like that does get easier. I would imagine over the years that will get easier. And I hope that I can get to a point where, like Ingo, where that stuff, rolls off my back and it doesn't affect me. But I got to say, I had one driver that, I was trying my best in these first years, but nothing I did was, I think he just didn't like working for a guy younger than him, but whatever. But he would say the meanest shit to me about the job I was doing and all that stuff. And as much as I tried to frame, like, who's this guy? It hurt. Fuck, did it hurt? And I'd be at home and I'd be talking to Ingo, and he go, why are you letting this affect you? Like, do you care about it? No. Like, and I know that, but I just couldn't stop. Like, it still eats at me to this day. Like, this thing's like,
No.
And I feel like it's a deep seated issue that I have. And I know I have this. I need everyone to love me because I like to think I'm nice to everybody. I'm a real nice guy. And because I love people, I love conversation. This is why this is the perfect role. I would bullshit with people all the time. The fact that I might be able to make a career out of it is just mind blowing to me, right? Because I would do this for free. I
always tell people that the best thing that you can do,
mm-hmm.
The best thing to equip yourself to be an elected official is go run a restaurant for 10 years.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right. Like that,
right? Because literally you're surrounded by people that you don't know, that half the time don't know you.
Yeah.
They always want something for less. When you screw up, they tell you all about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn to work through some of that. So, I've been blessed with the fact that I learned early, and
mm-hmm.
for a long time, I can tell you I don't let stuff get in the core, and I don't let it sit there, and I don't let it grow. Because at the end of the day, I'm only accountable, I have a responsibility
mm-hmm.
to 7,000 people. I have a responsibility to the 3 people that live under the same roof as me.
Yeah.
I have a responsibility for the people I hired to work and whatever else. But I am only accountable to myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so I always look inwards first,
mm-hmm.
and if you're happy with the decision that you made, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. And if you're not, then you focus on that and not on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I try to teach that into my kids, and I try to teach that in my team, that you need to, I was just meeting with one of my staff yesterday, we're growing into a leadership role. And I said, like, listen, you keep talking a lot about Sam when you need to be focused on you, because, it's not about, our goal is not to change Sam. Your goal should be to constantly change you.
Mm-hmm.
That should be your number one goal all the time, is to be changing you, to be bettering yourself, to adapt your own stuff, and always look inward before you're looking over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And you never really gain much by looking over the fence.
No.
And so sorry, just in conclusion, I will say that the world is full of noise.
Yeah.
Fuck, there's more noise than there ever has been.
Mm-hmm.
With internet and all these social media stuff going on, and TV or whatever else, we are surrounded by opinions and ideas, and noise. And so you have to keep going back to that core there and focus on yourself, because all of a sudden, people too, they spend way too much time thinking the stuff that they hear is true, right? It's fact.
Especially with social media.
It's fact. It's not fact. It's an opinion, and everyone has a right to their opinion, but make sure that when you're reciting something, make sure when you're absorbing something, make sure when you're sending it out, that's just someone's opinion. So you go back to that guy shitting on you or whatever else. That's his opinion. It is not fact. Yeah. Right? Fact comes from looking inside and starting there and saying, was this true or not? If it's not true, don't worry about it.
Right.
It's his opinion. He has a right to his opinion. I don't need to argue with him and try to change his opinion. That's his own damn problem he's got to worry about.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's exactly what I would, say, like, why is this? I know this isn't true. I know I'm busting my ass. I know, and again, this is going to sound bad, but when you look at the actual criteria, like, was the business successful? It was amazing successful. Like, if you look at just the terms of like how, just results wise, it looked like I was doing a pretty good job, right? Obviously, I came into a pretty good area with pretty good people, and like, I'm not going to say that that was all me or even a huge part of me. I think that was probably a lot of it was nothing to do with me, but I knew I was putting in that effort, and the fact that it let me, that it was bugging was because I knew it wasn't true. And that was what ate at me so much. But I love what you say about, accountable to yourself. And that's the biggest thing that I worry so much about, what other people think, and not about, are you happy with the effort that you're putting in? Right. And that is,
that's the only thing you have to worry about every single day.
Yeah.
As long as that person, when you look at it in the mirror and at the end of the day that you feel like you did a good job, you feel like you gave it your best, you feel like you gave a shit and you're going to keep putting in effort. Yeah. It's the only thing that matters.
So I have some questions about politics in general, municipal politics and bigger. But before I do, I kind of want to just give a little bit of a ramble about my position on politics, just because.
Because I have no idea what you're.
There you go. Okay. So on the podcast, I feel like people are probably sick of it. I am very anti-politics in general.
Okay.
And I feel like all the time when I'm talking shit about politics and just what is awful about it, in my head, I'm always thinking, I hope Tyler doesn't hear this, because I mean, when I talk about politics, I always mean it in a large scale, right? Yeah. Once you get on the national stage, even provincial, I feel like it kind of falls apart. But I love so much of what just your local government and what they do. And that is one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on, because I feel like I rail so much against politics and just that the whole system is broken. That it doesn't matter if you vote for right or left. It's the same people, same issues. It's fundamentally doesn't work. And that's the issue. It's not even the people that are in these positions. They're just doing their job. And it's the system works in a way that this kind of things come up, right? Just how money works in politics. But I love so much. I don't want that to take away from what people do for these local governments and the amazing work that they get done. And what I heard you mention earlier was you have to treat it like running a family. And I love that. That is so true. And I feel like that in itself sums up my position. I think better, I'd have to do, maybe 6 hours to explain why, but I feel like that sums up my position with it. It's because that is what you need. You need to run, government needs to run like a family. But that's very hard to do once you get bigger than 7,000 people. It's hard to do with 7,000 people, right? Yeah, well, but I think it becomes almost impossible once you do a couple magnitudes greater than that. Does that, I'm trying to now weasel this all the way back into a question now that I rambled that long, but like, does it bug you the brush that politics get painted with in general, where it has nothing really to do with the work that you're doing? Do you ever feel that is being painted on you? Does that bug you at all? And do you agree with kind of how I frame that, or do you think I'm missing some pieces there?
No. I think, I think if there was ever a sentiment that politicians or politics is screwed up, fuck, it's never been louder than it is right now.
Right. That's,
And it's so polarizing. You look at the stuff that's going on south of the border there with the last election and that sort of thing. Yes, they've made a change, but literally they're a country divided that was like 50-50 just about everywhere you go.
Right.
And two totally polar dynamics there, right? From, I'm trying to be politically correct or whatever else, but one guy's got some real interesting ideas about how to do things around a country, and the other one, he's like the polar opposite of that. And I look at it and think, man, 375 million people, and these are the two best candidates that you came up with.
Right.
Like it's no wonder that people don't have faith in politics anymore. And so there's two comments I would make with that. One, once again, I'm only accountable to myself, but I do have a responsibility to 7,000 people. What I do know is I don't have a responsibility beyond that 7,000 people. So in my house, I think that there are things that are important. I think that those people need to be informed. And so I continue to say that communication is a huge part. And I don't understand why, but politicians, big companies, big corporations, big levels of government still suck terribly at communicating with the end user, and it caused so much divide and friction between those two entities, and they have to recognize that communication is the problem,
right?
And they're so scared to screw up. You know, like, Jesus, we're so scared to screw up. We take 10 hours to communicate, and we water it down so much that we're not really even saying anything that has substance.
Exactly.
Anymore. And so, you know, that's a problem. I think that, you know, there's a lot of facets, whether it be politics, whatever, they need to work on their communication, because I honestly don't think all those people are stupid or they're a bunch of idiots or whatever else. They just don't express why they have their viewpoint or why they made that decision or do whatever. I'll give you an example. I honestly think one of the greatest things that ever happened in Slave Lake, I wasn't even a part of. It's this building. It's this government building, town office building. It was $30-some million that we built over the old Sawridge Mall, and away we go. Man, council took a ton of shit for that thing because all it was, I can't believe they're putting $30 million into this town office.
Yeah. I remember hearing that.
When our arena, what about our kids and all these people will be using, and we need new ice surfaces, and they ended up doing that afterwards. Yeah. Well, behind the scenes, what the deal was is actually the province said, we don't want to own any buildings. We don't want to deal with this. We just want to do lease. That was their thing, and away they go. So they basically went and rebuilt this town office. They got the province fronted all the cash.
Right.
It didn't count against any of our debt. They give us all the money every single month. We make over $1 million a year in rent that goes into this deal, or whatever else. And at the end of the 20 years, it will all be paid off, and then we just collect it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's actually a really good deal. It's probably the best ever, but they just really failed to communicate it properly. Right. And so I always use that as an example of, you know, it's not a dumb idea. We just have to explain why we're doing it. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, I will tell you, when you get into, I like municipal politics because I don't have to have a color. I don't have to have a party. I just got to be a dude that takes some good information and makes the best decision possible. 100%. And today, if I'm red, that's fine. Tomorrow I'm blue. Then the next day I'm green. I can live in those different worlds because I understand, like, talking about a path to success, it's not a straight line. Yeah. And I do struggle with, and I have to be careful what I say here because, you know, provincial politics does interest me, federal not so much, that, you know, I struggle with this whole party line. Yeah. And at some point too, I think government is overdue to evolve the system. 100%. Right. You know, I look at provincial politics from the outside looking in, and it's easy from the outside looking in because I'm not on the inside, and they would probably have a totally different viewpoint. But we elect all these people, and then we have about 50% of them work on the stuff that we want for this province. Yeah. And the other 50% just attack those 50% and tell us why they shouldn't be there. Yeah. And so then on the other side, these guys that are actually working for us have to spend half their time defending everything that they do. You know, you always want to know why government, you know, takes longer and costs more money. It's because I can't just go build a bridge because I know I need a bridge. Yeah. First, I've got to tell someone to tell me that has some degree so that those people out there tell me that, yeah, your bridge is falling apart and it needs to be done. Yeah. And then I just can't go build a new one out of wood because I have to have some other guy that justifies and says, yeah, well, actually wood is a better go because steel,
the environmental
rust, and do whatever
reporting,
else. And then we have to factor in all these pieces. There's this overarching thing where we have to justify everything that we do. And the problem with that too is that it's costing us. It's costing us too much. Like, taxpayers are getting tired of paying money. Yeah. So one, as politicians, we need to start defining what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. Right. And it has to be very clear from the get-go. Like, let's not pretend we're going to build a skateboard park if we're not going to build a skateboard park. Right. Let's not build a skateboard park because we want it when there's other things that are more of a priority. And so let's define what we say that we're going to do and somewhat stick to it. You know, we have to move a little bit or whatever else, but sometimes politicians are too afraid to say no. Yeah. And they need to say no from the beginning instead of getting hopes up and you know, getting these emotions up and things building and wasting people's time. Right. The other thing is that if we want to alleviate risk, it costs money. And so at some point, I think we're reaching a ceiling where we're putting in so much money to alleviate so much risk. It's also becoming unsustainable and unaffordable. And so we need to put some more risk back into the equation and it be okay to screw up. Yeah. And let's start saving some money and making some decisions that way. And I think then, you know, the benefit of being in the municipal politics is I see my 7,000 people every day. I see them at the grocery store. I see them at the hockey games. I see them in my restaurant. I see whatever. When you get into these other pieces, you know, you don't see those people often anymore, and you end up getting focused on your space instead of the space that you started to represent. You know, a federal, like if I was living in Ottawa 6 months of the year trying to represent the 7,000 people over here, there becomes this even more massive disconnect.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then we spend a lot of time throwing politicians under the bus because they're not here knocking on our door.
Right.
But in fairness, sometimes we're not knocking on theirs. We're just expecting them to do all this stuff, but we offered nothing to the equation other than you suck at your job. But what's the solution? Well, I don't know. You guys should figure it out. Well, what the fuck do you think I've been doing all day?
Yeah.
Right. And I don't have it, and I'm not perfect, and we're going to keep doing it. But, there's a lot of people that, Slave Lake's been successful municipal wise with the provincial government. I think it's partly, and part of this, I don't even want to share this because people open their eyes to it. Sometimes you're a product of your own success just because other people haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
And I will say, anytime you go to the bank for a loan and you stand there and say, you should give me money, you are very often not successful. But if you go to them and say, here's a plan, this is why it makes sense, here's whatever, and you offer the idea, right? There's a lot of people line up and say, hey, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
But we spend a lot of time bouncing our fist on the thing, just magically expecting everything's going to change when, we have to offer solutions. We got to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
We got to encourage people to stand up and run for these positions. We got to encourage people to vote. We got to check in with those people. We got to let them know when we're succeeding. And, I get why people are frustrated with politics and politicians need to do a better job. But I also think that as the public, we all need to get on the same page about our expectations. I think there's a huge disconnect there. Snow removal. We used to spend a lot of time, and sorry, Nick, I keep cutting you off here.
No, give her. This is.
I got to tell you, the most frustrating thing is snow removal. So my first year, and the number of calls I got about snow removal, I couldn't get over it. And so, coming back to that logical thing and that planning guy or whatever else. Okay, well, first off, like, what is our expectation of snow removal?
Right.
And so if I take the 7 elected officials and we ask them, well, there's 7 different definitions of that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go back to the piece of paper that somebody created at the beginning and said that this is what the service level is. And so we did that and we took a look at that. And so now all of a sudden the 7 people in the room have the same expectation because that's what administration was working towards.
Right.
And sometimes they were falling flat too, but it was because when we went in budget, we didn't give them a grader and it was broke down. Well, now these pieces are starting to make sense. And then we went out to the public and said, hey, just so we're all on the same page, this is a service level. This is the line. Yeah. And then we went and we took it a step further and we did some public engagement and said, okay, like, we thought about this idea and we thought about that idea. We can try this and do whatever. And we figured out the costs and this is what it's going to cost. What do you want to do? Yeah. Well, all of a sudden it was the public knew the line, council knew the line, administration knew the line. We all knew where we're at. We all decided where we were going to stay at. And now the basis is just recommunicating that same information because you can't just check the box and say you're done. You got to keep recommunicating that. But I can tell you, I'd be lucky if I get 4 or 5 calls about snow removal in a whole season. Right. When I used to get 5 in a day. Yeah. And it's just, I use that as an example to say we all need to get on the same page about the expectation and things become a lot more manageable. Right. And that's I think where on the provincial or federal level, it's tough. It's tough to get a lot of people together on it. And I feel like there's so many things put in place to get people fighting over other things because I think there's some things where everybody's on the same page for, but government doesn't really want to, there's certain things that would decrease their power. My biggest example for this is ranked choice voting. The fact that what, sorry?
Ranked choice voting. Okay. Do you know what ranked choice voting is? No. So how it works is you, when you go to vote, say the next mayoral election, me, you, Ingo, and Dana are running, right? Yeah. So now you think Ingo is the best candidate, but he's not going to win, right? But you don't really like me or you who are the front runners, so you're not going to vote for him because you don't want to throw your vote away. So what you do is you put Ingo first, Tyler Warman second, Dana third, Nick last because I really don't like him, and now you put your vote towards Ingo. If Ingo, so then what they do is they take all the votes. If somebody doesn't have, I think they said it as like a 60% majority, they take the person that got the least amount of votes, take them off and put your second choice up as the first one, right? And they keep doing that until somebody gets a majority. Right. What it does is just gets rid of the throwing your vote away thing, right? Which is, I think, less so in Canada because we do have more party. This is more my argument for the States, but it's I swear I'll make a larger point about it after. But the fact that that is so universally understood, it's very much a whole bunch of European countries do it. The fact that there's no party in the States that are saying, hey, this is something we'd bring in, because that would take power away from them. That two-party structure gives them a lot of power, right? It holds a lot of people away, holds a lot of ideas away that would be an attack to their structure. And that would be a huge step towards a more equitable outcome would be that one thing. And you don't hear it brought up. You don't hear anybody does bring it up. They get demonized. Any up-and-coming politician brings that up as that's going to be part of the platform, they get demonized. And that's just one example.
Because there's this thing called political will, right? And so there's what makes sense, what's right, what should happen, and then there's political will.
For sure.
I will, we joke about that, some of the stuff behind the scenes all the time or whatever else, that, the system doesn't change is because the people that in there would have to change the most. You know who wants to change? Everybody. Until the change comes and then no one actually really wanted to change. And so, you look at politics and we look at provincial politics or federal politics, we're using the same system we've been using for a million years. And there's slight changes, but I think it's time to, I think the best system is if we elect 100 people to look after Alberta, then 100 people should be working on that.
For sure.
We shouldn't have 51.
Yeah.
And somehow we need to figure out, some tweaks to that to make it make sense. Because too, I think that when we get pigeonholed into one point or another, we also start to put up too many walls. We miss some good viewpoints. We miss some of that other discussion. I think that's important to making the right decision, because we spend a lot of time listening to the people in our box and forget to listen to the people in another one. So, I think change has to happen.
Right.
But the question is how do you get those 100 people to decide that, this is it, because it's a gamble, it's a risk. And, you're living on the outside of that comfort level that not all of them are going to survive when you go through that. And if you don't change anything, you will survive.
Yeah.
It's some big stuff there.
Yeah. And there's so many factors that go into it. And another piece that you brought up that I really loved was the accountability piece. I feel like that is one of those places where you would think, I feel like the level of accountability once you get past municipal politics is absolutely null and void. There's no accountability. I feel like because the accountability comes every 4 years, 3 years, whatever that term is, and you can lose your job. But now you lose your seat. Now you're the opposition and you're pretty much in the same spot, if not better, right? Like those two things, there's no real consequences. There's no real accountability to these people. And I feel like that is what so many people are thirsty for and just desperate for, is just some honesty, like what we have here, where it just by virtue of the situation, 7,000 people, your accountability is forced, like you said, because you see these people out every day. Like that is a level of accountability that is completely lost once you take it up to the next step. And I feel like
I don't think it's lost. I just think it's different.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like if there was some sort of accountability, I feel like I know that's just one example, but I think there's things like ranked choice voting, whereas it doesn't hurt anything but the power that government in general has. And I feel like that is where you see, if there was accountability to that, and I guess maybe this is society as a whole of the people not bringing this up as an issue and not being engaged, but I feel like they will purposefully drum things up in the media to fight on both sides, so that those issues that both sides would agree with, right? Like again, ranked choice voting or any of these things that would benefit everybody don't get brought up. They're not being held to the fire because they're feeding you so much, fight about masks, fight about this, fight about that. And they just flame this up from both sides, because they both know that the right and the left don't want ranked choice voting, because now it's not right and left anymore. It's right, left, middle, up, down, diagonal and
well, the other issue is that the system is created in such a way that when you get to provincial and federal, there really is no benefit, and actually there's a huge risk and a liability by agreeing that the other side is right.
Exactly.
Right. And so,
how do we change that?
I think there's a fundamental problem there that, I see it from two viewpoints. So one, the easiest way I think is to say that there's no parties. The problem with that is that, there's some big decisions that gets made there, and there's some benefit to the voter you talk about accountability, right, whether it's municipal or provincial or whatever. The real only accountability in the system is election time.
Yeah.
Right. And so I could be a bum and do fuck all for 4 years, and you guys really can't do anything about it. So the reason I have more accountability is just the maybe it's the pride, maybe it's the guilt because I see them every day. But it's no different from municipal to provincial on that.
Right.
Where I was going with that is that in the party side of things, though, as a voter, and some of the most passionate political voters like the stability of knowing that when I'm buying blue, I'm getting blue, and I'm going to get blue for 4 years.
Right.
I might not agree with everything or whatever else, but there's some safety, some accountability and reliability in me coming out and voting and getting what I wanted.
Right.
And so those are the two spectrums there that, it'd be great to not have parties, but, I also want some as a business person, we would say that our number one most important thing when we go to grow our business, to invest in our business, making decisions in our business, is we want predictability.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When we don't have predictability, we don't want to spend a dime.
Right.
We want to wait and see what the world looks like. And so, I think that's the benefit of party politics is they bring predictability, which a lot of people want.
Yeah.
But that also inhibits some of these other things from actually maturing or growing or changing or whatever else.
Right.
And so somewhere in the middle, like everything, is the right answer. And 100%. So it's just a matter of, I think provincial and federal politics, I don't spend a lot of time looking over the border. I focus on my own country, and in our own country, I think we're overdue to make some tweaks and evolve. And, as business people, as parents, as students, as teachers, over the last 12 months, we have been forced to evolve dramatically. And we will all see there, there's a lot of things that come with that. But I think as a society, as a country, as a people or whatever else, we will be stronger and better for it because we will, if we put in the time, we put in the effort, we're coming up the hill, we lean into it and do whatever, you will always come out on top 100%.
Yeah.
And so I just think we're overdue to lean in and make some of those adaptations in government that everybody else is having to do.
Right. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that's where maybe we differ a little bit, where I look over that fence all the time. I'm way more active in American politics than I am in Canadian politics, for the reason that I feel like it has more effect. If I'm honest, I feel like the American election has more to do with my outcomes in Canada than the Canadian election at certain times, right? Like there's certain ideas there, and it's especially for Canada, but I feel like that's worldwide, right? Like as much as there's arguments away from it, they're a cultural leader. They are the free world, right? Like that's the reason they call the president of the United States the leader of the free world at this point, right? That has changed over, used to be Britain, used to be all these different places that were that. And I watch it, and that's where I see some of these issues. And I feel like they're way less apparent in Canada, but they're still there underneath. And I feel like it's the same argument. And two things I really liked what you said. It was kind of, you were talking about the communication and how key that is, and the accountability. And to me, it seems like there's a hack that is available that nobody's tapped into yet. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, that I think is going to absolutely change politics going forward, because I don't think politics is going to like it.
A hack is coming. Okay.
So what we've seen in the last probably 8 years or so with podcasting and YouTube and streaming and these things is this direct to consumer, long form accountability of really genuine showing who you are as a person and letting all those walls down and being honest about the work you do. And I feel like that is something where if you had that in politics, it would solve all these issues, because now somebody would be communicating every week, long form, exactly what they want to do. And the decision making that goes in behind this, people are getting that trust. It's not just the facade, right? Like one of the things that made me so mad throughout the COVID pandemic, and one of the reasons was every morning Trudeau would go out and read his speech and you'd learn nothing. It's just absolute nonsense. It just word salad, word salad, word salad. Nothing came out. Same thing every day, week after week is the same thing. And I thought, you can only get away with that because of this system has been set. We haven't updated, but the fact that you can go up and read off a speech and that's acceptable to us. The only reason that's acceptable to us is because that's the way we've done it. If an alien came down right now and said, oh, you have the internet, you have all these things, and that's your communication method. Like the method is broken. It's not, obviously whoever's, I mean, it obviously Trudeau's in power, but whoever's in there, they would take advantage of that. If that's how the system works and they can get away with saying nothing, I'm going to say nothing. Why would I take like you say, there's such low risk level. Why would I take the risk of making a misstep? Everyone's so ready to jump on everybody's throats when there's a misstep that they don't. So now you just walk this really thin line. There no communication happens. And I feel like there's going to be a change to that where we stop as a society, stop accepting that.
Well, in fairness though, like you know, I wouldn't line up to defend Trudeau a lot, but I will defend politicians in the sense that I will tell you that as the consumer is creating part of that, right?
For sure.
The reason those guys tell you nothing and the reason they water it down and the reason they're trying to build walls around them and shields is because we're throwing more tomatoes than we ever have.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that.
And so I'll be I any problem, everybody that lives in there is part of the issue. We all have different varying percentages of how big of an issue we are, and we all have different varying percentages of our responsibility to change it.
Yeah.
But we have to recognize as a society that part of the problem with politics is the people that vote for the politicians. We have to realize it's the people that set the expectation of the politicians.
People on Twitter.
Those things are happening. Like, you can think of, you talked about how much it hurt from that one truck driver giving you a hard time. Can you imagine being that guy and the shit that he gets and the stuff and memes and just personal attacks and do whatever.
For sure.
And then have kids that read that stuff that, that are your children and your wife or whatever. I can't imagine anybody wants to do that job.
Right.
And then we get frustrated as voters because we don't have these awesome candidates lining up to do the job.
Nobody would want to do.
Right. So I will tell you, like, at some point we all have to look that inwards again and say, hey, if we really want to change the situation, we all need to have this safe conversation. And I don't think a space has been created for safe conversations.
No.
Where you can have those open dialogues and say, okay, hey, do we need to do this? I recognize I have been successful in my political career because I am not polished by any means. I don't write anything down. I don't do any speeches or whatever else. I do a lot of communication, but it's just out of Tyler's head. And sometimes I nail it and sometimes I don't. And I think that genuine. That real approach has resonated with people. But I only have 7,000 people who know me. And in fairness, people that know you don't usually attack you. It's the people that don't.
Exactly.
And so, as the higher you go up, you get a lot of people that don't know you and a lot of people that are ready to attack. And so it becomes less safe and a lot less easy to do that. So I will just say, I would think if I was a premier of Alberta that I would just be a little more candid and open and genuine or whatever else.
That's not how the game works.
But you might just invite more shit kicking out of that too, that,
For sure. And I think you're so right on that. The amount of tomatoes has been thrown as soon as social media gave everybody access to an opinion that seemed to be as valid as anybody else's on there, and they got used to that. We've been slinging stones like crazy, and that is something that we're going to have to, there's a reckoning coming with that of, again, same thing we talked about earlier, where we're now coming up with, tools to navigate what we needed in 2006. I think it's the same way where people are starting to connect with, hey, throwing tomatoes on social media all day doesn't make you feel very good, does it? No. It's not a very good place to be. A couple points that I would make backward. I agree with that point. If somebody knows you, they're much less likely. There's no way to know politicians because of the way that it is, right? Like, I know you. I because of growing up with you, I got to be around you. As soon as, if you're the mayor of Edmonton, you don't have that. But if you did start, I'm saying a podcast, a YouTube channel, something where you are genuinely conversating with people if they choose to. I've had this argument with people, one of my buddy Simon, Simon, he said, well, no one's going to listen to it. And that's a pretty good argument. That's the best argument I've seen against this idea yet. That's a lot to ask of people to listen to it. But I feel like it's one of those things where with that level of genuineness, people will get to know you. And that is what I think the big disconnect is there's no way to know you. And the system is set up in a way where they're not incentivized to know it, right? Because they're just going to get hit with shit. And I guess one point is that I guess I have an expectation where I expect more. The fact that, there's going to be tomatoes thrown, right? I don't think that gives you an excuse to just come up and word salad and not actually communicate with the people of your country, right? I feel like I see why you're doing it and it seems natural. And I'm sure anybody else, like, it's not a knock on Trudeau. It's a knock on the system of whoever's in that place in that time. They're going to do that because rationally, that's the best outcome. I'm talking about what can we do and what kind of expectations can we change so that that isn't the case. The natural outcome of it, the logical outcome is just to say nothing. That's the system we've created. Like, and I completely agree with you. We need wholesale change to make that happen. I think
we need to be like Israel.
Oh yeah,
right?
In what way? I think I could come up with a couple ways off the top of my head, but I'm curious.
Well, you know what? I will say that in Israel, everybody knows what defense and military is all about because everybody had to go through that system. Service, right? Mm-hmm. There's something to be said that I'm not sure. I don't want anyone to think of going down the path that we should all have mandatory service, but there is a benefit in if you want to change a system that everyone understands it.
100%.
And so the reason, it's a very small percentage of people that are involved in politics. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the problem as well, that the more people got into politics, the more understanding and appreciation they would have for how the system works. And there would be more flowing of ideas. And so, it's unfortunate too, when we have an election and, being a guy on the other side, Jesus, I hope nobody runs against me. I've been pretty fortunate here that I haven't had a lot of competition. I think my that's going to run out this fall, but I will say that, the worst thing that can happen for politics is to have 7 positions and 8 people running. Yeah. Right. We should have 20 people running for sure. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that we can build the best combination and voters have that opportunity. And so somehow everything always starts from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And so we can't keep looking up and telling them all to change. We have to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is something you mentioned earlier and something that I feel very deeply is don't complain if you don't have a solution to bring to the table. And that was something where I never went on social media and commented. That's just not me. And every time I see somebody on there, it's one of my friends that does that, I lose respect for them so quick. That it's just so antithetical to everything I stand for to just go on with no account. No, you're not face to face. There's no consequences to you. It's free reign. And to see what you act, that's the same to me as, how people treat waiters when they think there's no consequences, right? Somebody's rude. I don't have time for you. Right. And I agree that is something that needs to change if we're going to move forward. But that is, when I started this podcast, that was one of those things where I wanted to say something. I wanted to have my feelings hurt, but if I was going to bitch, I was going to come with solutions forward, right? That's why I created. So now I don't really have the excuse just to drop a tweet like, oh, this is bullshit. We need more paving in Slave Lake, but I don't have to defend it. I don't have to say why I think that way. With this, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to have to back it up. And hopefully I keep bringing on people that will push me, that help bring my ideas forward. I feel like there's something to be said in that adds a layer of accountability to everybody. If we could make it so that everyone had to stand by what they said and we could take away, or
because to that point, I will tell you, like there's a huge issue there with society in the sense that, social media has allowed us to create multiple personalities of ourselves, right? You give me somebody that's crazy on and making a bunch of bitching negative comments or whatever on social media, and then put them in the same room with me. There's 2 different people there, for sure, 100 million%. And so there's a danger there that going back to be accountable to yourself or whatever else. I don't know where I'm going with that other than the fact that we're developing these multiple personalities, and I see it a lot in politics because I gravitate towards social media because I actually think social media makes politics a lot easier. And so, I use it as an information source. Right. And so I'll call those people out, I'll bring them in, I'll do whatever. And pretty soon their whole personality changes. Right.
Right. And I think that's the correct way to do it. Right. So now what I was building up there is exactly right. These multiple personalities. So there's 2 fixes in the way I see it, right? We can either try to get everybody on board to do less of that, to throw less stones, to be a better person online. Very admirable, very difficult, but
very not possible.
Very impossible, right?
Yeah, like we can talk about the good there, and we can do a Care Bear commercial, but it ain't happening.
So I agree. So then my mindset goes, so then you understand that there's multiple personalities. You bring that person in the door, that's going to be a much different person than they were behind their keyboard, right?
Totally.
We understand that. So now why do we allow social media to dictate policy when we know that is not what they stand behind? This is not what's true. And then also, it's so easy for foreign actors to make 1,000 accounts and do this. We have proof that Russia does it, China does it, all these countries, like Canada, I'm sure Canada does it. I'm sure the US does it, right? It's just too easy not to. And there's actually some amazing journalistic reporters that have investigated this, especially in Russia, because everyone's after Russia. But if Russia's doing it, they've got 3 buildings full of people doing it. China's got 6, right? That's what it is. So it seems like everybody understands rationally that these people are different, and that social media, what they say on there, isn't actually what they feel and isn't actually the public sentiment. And yet I'm seeing more and more that the way that the wind blows on social media is the way that politicians and people in power act to them. And not just politicians, businesses, anybody with any power, they're using social media.
But it's less about the social media and more about the politician. And so the thing is that politicians are getting sucked into the noise.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what's happening. Right? And so, it becomes that, and politics follows the noise. It really does.
It does. But
politics
that noise is so easily affected. I feel like there's certain noise, and that's always how politics worked. But then that noise, I feel like we need to take. So say there's 100% of noise, right? Coming in from all these different sides. Yeah. Let's say 50% of that is social media, right? Yeah. And we say, you know what? I don't take social media, I take it half seriously because it's only 50%. But what we need to recognize is that within that 50% of the noise, all the noise around us, that 50% that comes from social media, only 5 of that is actually true, right? So really, we put so much weight on that thinking it's 50 because it's so loud. We think it is, But really it's not. And it's the worst of us, the worst of society that's on there kicking up fusses over it, right? Like anybody I respect and you respect, are they spending all their time on Facebook, bitching about shit? Not really. So now why do we take that social media opinion and value it that highly? I just don't.
I honestly think it's just because politicians follow the noise. Like I think, it's very hard when someone, I've had to check myself multiple times to say, okay, whoa, before I go down that rabbit hole, that's one person's viewpoint. So let me go get a few more viewpoints. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. Actually, multiple people, when I start asking a question, we do have an issue here.
And I love what you said, when you see it on social media, you're going to call that guy and you have the opportunity with it, and bring them in and talk to them and get their real opinion. And that probably changes from what they said on social media. But you lose that opportunity once you take it up.
In fairness, I'll just be honest here. I don't call every guy that goes on there.
But fair enough, right?
It's an opportunity to do that. But where I was going with that is that politics was always like that, and people are always like that.
Yeah.
We can call it politics, we can call it whatever, but we listen to the loudest voice.
Yeah.
And we have to, as individuals, remember that loud doesn't mean accurate. Priority. Loud doesn't mean true. Loud doesn't mean it's everybody.
For sure.
Loud is not majority. And so you have to find that balance in there. And we also have to understand too, you talk about municipal versus provincial politics. Municipal politics, I will tell you, like I own multiple companies here or whatever else. I have a bunch of different jobs, and mayor is only one of them. Right. It is honestly the least paid job I have. Like at the end of the day, if I lose this job, whether I decide I don't want to do it anymore or people decide they don't want me to do it anymore, the risk financially is pretty low. When I get in provincial and federal, most of those guys, they don't have multiples anymore. That's their whole bread and butter. And when they they have nothing to go back to. And so there's a necessity for self-preservation to listen to some of the noise. And so the skill is trying to figure out, is the noise the majority or is the noise just noise? And I think they're always trying to do that.
Right.
Because a lot of times too, you have that middle ground, right? We have this noisy group on the left and we have this noisy group on the right. And then we have the middle ground, and the middle ground doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
All right. And 100%. So at some point too, I think the middle ground needs to start communicating a little bit better too, for us to understand where the majority actually is.
Right. Right. And that was something that I felt very deeply, and that was my thing. I was so frustrated with the left, so frustrated. The same thing, right? We have Biden and Trump here. Like, I could absolutely spend 3 hours on each of these people, eviscerating who they are, what they stand for, their parties, everything that's about them, and that is our options, right? And I'm thinking I'm somewhere in the middle, and I have pieces of those, but I'm not making my voice heard at all, right? Like, I am that middle, but I'm not talking. I feel like that's why, and what drew.
Or we're talking to the wrong people.
Right.
Right. We're talking to ourselves. We're sitting in our basement talking to my buddy. But it never really goes any further than that. Right.
Exactly. But what showed me is I was so desperate for somebody in the middle. It's all that you see from all the typical places is this side or this side, and we're going to encamp on this and we won't hear anything from the other side, right? And it was very frustrating, demoralizing. But then you go on the internet and you find all these amazing people that I followed that are that middle, that are vocal and are growing at just a rate they're knocking, TV shows off the ratings, right? Like the reason Joe Rogan's the most influential person in the world right now is because of that, because people are obviously not very vocal about it, but very desperate for this middle ground of reasonable, nuance and compassion in that for people. But I feel like it's been this way for so long that change is scary, and they're doing everything they can to villainize those people and show that. But what you can't villainize is that people, if there's 300 million people listening a month to something, just because you demonize that, those people know exactly what is being said. You can try and cut out a little piece and post it, but if you listen to the whole 3 hours, you know exactly what that meant in context. You can try all these tricks, and you've seen how many times they've tried to cancel Joe Rogan over the last 6 years. Probably over 100 times they've tried. It's never worked because people know exactly what it is, and that's where I feel like that's the protection that would offer, right? It kind of going back to bringing. But
you have to build up enough of it.
You have to build up enough of it, right?
To have that, right?
And
we got to give them the opportunity to survive long enough that we get to know them. Because if we just in one or two, we'll just cut them down.
Which is why I said this is coming, right? When I said, like, I think a big change is coming with podcasting or some equivalent, some long form equivalent, genuine equivalent, coming into that space. I feel like that's the exact reason, because you look at somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who's now doing that in the States, right? She's running and she's starting a podcast and doing that, but she's already too much into it. She already tried to bring up some of these things, this middle ground fight for it. And they said she's an agent of Russia, and you see the whole political establishment come out to demonize her because, she was bringing up stuff like ranked choice voting and all this stuff. Is like, oh, she's not part of this group. She's doing some scary things. Let's demonize her. What I think is going to be coming is it's going to start at a municipal level. Some kid with a podcast is going to start talking. People are going to listen to what he says. He's going to be really honest, and then he's going to run for something. And then he's going to keep building it up. And that it's Athabasca, and everybody at Athabasca is listening to this guy every week, and they're getting some really good results. Nothing's perfect, and he admits, I fucked up. I thought this would be a really good investment. It doesn't turn out. It's still going to be good, and they're honest. That is going to build. That is going to be a rocket ship that's going to have so much behind it, even if it's only 2,000 or 3,000 people that are vehemently behind that person. That is going to be so much different, because I feel like what politics has become with all this stuff, not a lot of people believe in it. Who gets really excited behind their guy lately? It's not a lot of it, especially when you look at the States, right? Like, you had some people that were, so diehard red or blue that they were cheering for this guy. But really, if you talk about the people themselves, Trump's a little bit of an odd case. It's hard to say because he's so charismatic in different ways, but has nothing to do with politics, right? But politically, there's nobody that's politically exciting. And I feel like that is going to be a big change, where we're going to see people get actually excited politically about people because they have more access and they know who that person is, right? I feel like that is what is going to bring what we talked about at the start, what makes municipal politics special, and that accountability and what that is. I feel like we can bring it to bigger levels. It's just going to take time, because I feel like it's going to have to build up, because you see somebody, if they try it when they're already that far ahead, you get shot down. Like the unity, I don't even want to.
Well, I will say the one thing that's beneficial about the political world that we live in right now is people are watching and paying more attention and more engaged than they've ever have been.
By far.
I will tell you, Albertans as a whole, I think, I am a proud Albertan, and I was born in Saskatchewan, but we left there when I was 5 years old, and I've spent my whole life in Alberta, and I'm a proud Albertan. And I firmly believe that Alberta is this economic engine that drives the rest of the country.
Yeah. Agreed.
And we would be a very different country without Alberta. And the problem with Alberta is, when we're so busy driving that engine, we forget to check into the stuff on the edge. And politics is one of those things on the edge. And so if there's anything right now, people are more in tune with what's going on, more checked in than they ever have been. And I think if people continue to put in that effort, I think we're going to start to see some of that shift. We're going to start to see some of that change. But politicians are going to, coming back to my point about we're spending so much time mitigating the risk that we're full of shit now. We're not saying anything there, that we're going to have to, put on some armor and go out there and feel a little bit comfortable to open up. So, it's easy. Like I said, it's easy for me to say, because that's my personality. I recognize too that there's thousands of elected officials in Alberta, and they're all different than I am. And it's not easy for everyone, to let their guard down, to be able to take that, to be able to let it go and take that noise and go to bed and not worry about it or whatever else. And so it's going to take the right people, the right time, the right systems, the right energy there or whatever else. But I think the system is going to change because
I think it has to.
I don't think anybody's really happy with it.
No.
Right. I don't think anybody on any side of the fence. I don't think anybody in any party. I don't think anybody voting or even not voting anymore.
I think there are some people. I could name some people that were happy with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just and not even people. Just I feel like who is happy with it is the people that are set up extremely well how it works right now, and change could change that. Right. If you're Jeff Bezos, you don't want shit to change. Things are looking pretty good. You have all the control. You can, with the money and power that you have, you can pretty much get anything you want of that. Why would he want it to change, right? Why would, all these guys that are at a certain point,
fair enough.
And then certain politicians that have been, Joe Biden's been in this, doing it for 40 years. Why would he want it to change? Why would he, I know how to play it. I've been playing this game for 40 years. I don't want the game to change, right? Like, and I feel like that is what I have biggest issue with, is these people where I think it's 99% of people realize this needs to change, but there's 1% of people that really, really don't want it. And that's what's holding everything back. And the tools they use this is getting everybody fighting over little things so that they don't recognize that.
And I think we see a lot of that looking south of the border.
For
I
sure.
think there's a lot less of that going on in Canada.
I agree, but I feel we feel the repercussions from that.
Oh, agreed. Like, I'll not be naive enough to sit here and say that what happens in the States doesn't affect Canada. It has huge economic impacts, it has huge social impacts on us or whatever else. But at the same point in time, I realize that my life is a gas tank.
Yeah.
And I only got so much to give. And so I can spend a lot of time focusing on stuff over there that's really not going to change anything.
Right. When
if I can make some changes over here and send the right people south of the border, that's what's going to happen. That's where change is going to come from. So I will say, make sure that to anyone I'm speaking to, that passion, that energy is directed in somewhere that will actually have an impact.
For sure.
Otherwise, you're just contributing noise, right?
Yeah, yeah, and again, you got to come with solutions. And I do feel like what you mentioned there about the needing to bring more risk into it and find factors that allow for that armor. What can we do? But I feel like, not to come back to my idea, but I feel like that having some sort of true outlet to the people where they understand you, I feel like that is the armor, because that is, why we talked about it. They've tried to cancel Joe Rogan for this long, but he has that armor, right? That people that know who he is deeper. I know Joe Rogan better than I know 90% of my friends, right? I don't listen to, 9 hours a week of, Travis Malbeuf talking or Drew Discover, right? Like, people I'm very close to, I think I know really well. I don't listen to them talk 9 hours a week. You can build this up to a point where you are armed with so much protection that it's going to, I think that's not the solution. That's not what we need to work towards, but I think it would solve it. I think we need to find actionable ways right now to bring a little bit more of that risk in, be a little bit less scared to make a mistake. I think we would see immediate impact from that, right? I think that's hugely important, but I feel like that just by circumstance will also solve that issue eventually if somebody does take that step and tries that.
Agreed. And I 100% agree with you. I think politicians opening up and sharing a little bit more of themselves and be a little more down to earth would go a huge way. But, going back to your comment at the beginning here, you were scared shitless to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's scary.
So then you were comfortable in Zoom. You're scared shitless to go out and you weren't worried about people attacking you.
Yeah.
You were just worried about your own comfort level. So just remember that, society's going to have to because I actually think that politicians want to be more down to earth. I actually think that they want to, share more stuff about who they are. I think they want to, another thing that I do, in my own communication all the time, like I don't have this like Mayor Facebook page and a Tyler Warman Facebook page. One day I'm telling you about what the vaccine numbers are, and the next day I'm like, hey, I'm up in the mountains skiing with my kid. It's because it's important to me that people recognize that I'm just a dude. I'm still just a dad. I'm still just a business owner. I was all those things before I got into politics.
Right.
And someday when I'm not in, I'm going to be that person again. And so, I think politicians miss the opportunity to humanize themselves,
for sure,
which I think is literally probably the best armor that they could have. But it's not everybody's confident enough to do that. Not everyone's recognized strategic enough that they should be doing that.
Right.
And for a lot of them, they haven't created a space because it's like you talked about, like the grassroots thing is going to come from this kid that was talking, and then goes into that, goes into that dynamic where he wants to run, and then you just see that ladder climbing, but he had to start it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so some of these guys that are already 4 or 5 rungs up the ladder, it's tough to now start building in the steps that they missed.
Right. And I completely agree with you. And that's why I see this as something that's going to happen far in the future. But I think what happens is, I think a couple things are going to happen. It's going to happen once, and we're going to all look to see, well, how the hell did that kid do that? Right. And everyone's going to see the results will speak for themselves. And then the expectation changes. So now this kid does it, and now you're riding over, and fuck, they have this, now the expectations of what they expect, right? Because like you said, that is scary for people. But I think if the expectation changes of now, if you want to get into politics, you need that. This is the level of accountability we expect. And if you can't get on that, maybe it's not the job for you, right? And I feel like that is where I would like to see it go, because I have high expectations, right? If you want to take those steps, if you want to climb that, if you want to get up to the top, you know what, like, I think if you said that was going to be expected out of every mayor, that's pretty, but I think there's a certain level you can get to where if that becomes an expectation, it wouldn't be that untenable, and you'd find the right people. And I feel like that would also self-select for better people if you were willing to do that. I feel like one of the biggest issues you have is you have 2 types of people that want to go into politics: people that want to change the world, and people that want to gain power, right? Like, and I think one can turn into the other. Actually, they could probably both turn into each other, but I think probably the one happens more than the other, right? Just by the will of, playing the game, climbing that ladder, certain things happen that, it becomes about, the game is to, acquire more power and get up there. And that's not a bad thing if your base goal at the end of the day is still to change the world and still to do good. Wanting to gain power isn't the worst thing, but it's very easy for that to slip, right?
Agreed. I will also tell you, it's tough to change the world without power. So
yeah, exactly. That's why you can't demonize it.
You can't be scared of it either.
Mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm. But I feel like if we found a level where, because of that, every politician we see, our default now, I feel like with that distrust, that trust that's fallen, our default is to go, you think politicians, you think power, you don't think change the world. I think on a municipal level, it's much different. And that's what I like about it, is that perception about it does match up a lot better with what it is. Whereas once you get past that, I think if you polled 100 people and what they thought of politicians of a certain rung on that ladder, it wouldn't be too pretty. And I feel like that needs to change too. It's almost a very similar issue to how we treat teachers, right? Like the perception around them creates so many of the issues that we see, but it's all about the perception. But perception is one of the hardest things to change. It's easy to, write a new bill or comparatively it's easy. I'm sure it's still difficult, but to change perception, to change how people look at things is very hard to do and happens slowly.
Well, and one of the big things that we can't forget here is that, a lot of those issues come from the amount of opinions and voices that we're adding.
Right.
So, a big problem is, I can tell you right now, I know where the magic spot on the spectrum is. I have it all figured out. And so do you.
Yeah.
And when we compare our 2 lines, they're not the same one. And so now when we add 5,000 of them, we're starting to get some pretty big variation. We added 1 million, we added 4 million, we added 35 million. The variation now in what we all know is the right balance between them all is actually, oceans apart. And so, that's part of the issue. And I think why we have so much divide the higher you go is just we're adding so many different spectrums. And I will tell you too, you go to Ontario, most of them don't give a shit about Alberta, and you go to Alberta and most of them don't give a shit about Ontario. It's because we don't even know each other, right? It's not even a thing that Alberta's bad or Ontario's bad. It's that we have no idea what it's like to be a person from Ontario.
Yeah.
I have no idea what it's like to be a person from Quebec. I don't know what it's like to be a French-speaking person or whatever else. And so we all have it figured out.
Yeah.
But we forget that we only have our box figured out. And all of a sudden we want to go play in this bigger box.
Yeah.
And we've never even been in it. And we spend a lot of time on the outside looking in and saying, hey, this is how it should be. So I don't know, I'm playing that safe space where it's everybody's fault and it's nobody's fault and do whatever. But, I think we all need to spend a little more time listening and a little less talking.
For sure.
I think we all need to spend a little more time out of our comfort zone. I think we need to accept some risk as a society. And I think we need to spend a little more time judging ourselves before we're judging everybody else.
Couldn't agree. I mean, people listening to the podcast probably like, oh, here we go, getting back to this, because this comes up every single podcast I have because it's so meaningful to me. Self-accountability. clean up your own damn room, right? Like don't be worrying about other people. Clean up your own shit, work on yourself, sit with that, and all these outcomes will naturally fix themselves. If you start working on yourself, all these things that go wrong in your life will right themselves. That's all.
Totally.
People try to fix themselves through external means all the time and wonder why it doesn't work. The only way to fix internal things is to go internal, to work on yourself, to take everything that happens to your life and find your personal accountability, even if it sucks, even if it's a pandemic, even if it's all these things that were so far out of your control. If you can find the ways that you can be accountable, that you can take it onto yourself, that's where the progress lies. That's where you'll get better. If you just take things and you say, oh, well, I didn't deserve that didn't want to be, and you feel sorry for yourself, you might be right, but it doesn't help you. Doesn't help you get better for next time if you don't actually look at what you can do better, what could you have done. If you just let the world happen to you all the time, you're not going to learn very much. Or you might learn, but we won't learn at the same rate that you could if you taken it upon yourself, right? Like it's so important. And I feel like that is the lesson. I don't know what the wave my magic wand, the best way to get that to people, but I feel like it's such an admirable goal that it has to be something people think about. Like, how do we get that idea to more people? Because I think that would solve so many of the issues we've talked today about. Is everyone did that a little bit, if everyone worked on themselves 5% more in Canada, holy fuck, we'd be the next world power, right? We'd be going on
1,000,000%. You know, and if you spend 80% of your time focusing on yourself instead of focusing on everyone else around you, Jesus, like we would move mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You want to go change the world, but we forgot to paint our own fence.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
There are lots of people there want to fix the neighborhood, but they forgot to mow their grass. You know, you need to spend more time looking in your own backyard before you're looking in everybody else's. And I think that's a part of the problem with social media and everything that goes out. We spend a lot of time judging all the things around us, and we don't have enough deeper conversations about ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need, you talk about mental health. We spend a lot of time not dealing with the things that we keep putting into, we're like our own little bag here, and we keep putting things in the bag, and we forget to talk about them and let them out. We forget to say, yeah, I know I need to change the things I'm putting in.
Yeah.
We need to, we forget to do all these little pieces because there's so much focus on all these other things around us that we forget to focus on ourselves. And you need to focus on yourself to be good to yourself, to treat yourself right, to be healthy, to make positive decisions. But you also need to own when you're fucking up. You need to own when you make a mistake, and you need to change those things. Like there is anything that I could tell the most important thing in your life is focus on change in yourself, focus on your own accountability, because those are the things that are going to change the world.
Yeah. And just to add to that, one of the guests I had on made a metaphor of it, or told me, and it stuck with me. It's like everybody's sitting on a bridge, and there's a river of things going by that all seem important to you, all these things, and you pick them up. Oh, that's important. You carry all this stuff. If you hold on to that stuff, that bridge is going to collapse at some point. You need to learn that skill of letting some things go. It might be important, but what is important to you right now? What's really important? And just asking yourself those questions. And that's, again, going internal. It's a scary thing to do, but that skill of learning to put things down and let it flow by. You don't need to pick everything up, right? You need to really adjudicate what is going to be beneficial to you and what is going to be beneficial to you at that time. Maybe like,
well, and I'll tell you, a river is a prime example, because it's okay to let it go, because at some point something else is going to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like it's not like this is the end. The river's not going to stop flowing. There's still going to be stuff that comes. So take what you need when you need it. When you don't need it, put it down and wait for something else to come.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't mean you need to demonize these things, right? Like I always struggle with my anger. I have a pretty short fuse, and my anger gets the best of me all the time. And I really try to work on it. It's something that I consciously try to figure out where that comes from. And I think, the work I've done so far, I'm just thinking that a lot of times that was the only outlet I ever knew growing up. I wasn't taught how to use other emotions kind of in its place. And that's kind of the only notch I have when I feel something. It comes out as anger. If I'm scared, I get angry. If I'm, whatever, it all comes back to anger. And I feel like that is something where I was really struggling to fix that, because I was demonizing so much. I don't like my anger, but that fire and that anger inside of me also is good in some ways. Sometimes in business you need that. And I feel like that was a huge step to moving forward with it, was to not just look at it as a bad thing. No, it's part of it. My anger is part of me. And by beating up on that piece, I'm beating up on myself, and I'm not really enjoying who I am as a whole, right? I'm not loving myself completely, because there's a piece of that I think is bad. It's not bad. I'm just not using it effectively. I need to find times when when does it benefit me to pick up this anger and to hold it? When does it benefit me to let it go? And doing that, and I found that has been a huge input. I'm still not there. I mean, my knuckles are so fucked up just from punching shit, right? And never any people. It's always, things, but I know that anger's, that anger's there. But I found that the speed at which I was able to deal with it got so much better once I stopped looking at it as only a bad thing and just accepted, hey, that's a party. And, there's certain times where it doesn't serve you, certain times you do. And I feel like if you do that with everything in your life, you don't have to look at it as good and bad and label everything. Just when does it serve you? Does it serve you to have this time at this time or this thing at this time? And if it doesn't, let it go and getting better at that. Sometimes it's hard to do, but I think it's definitely a lesson that everybody could be learning, but it's hard to, I'm sure there's going to be people that listen to this podcast, hear those words, and it just, they recognize that, oh yeah, it's probably true. And I see a lot of value in it, but it's something about experientially feeling something that really makes it stick. And that's what I think the power of podcasts is. I feel like, you watch a 10-minute YouTube video, you're not really engaged, and you're not really, somebody listens to this, we're, almost 2 hours in here, right? They've listened to us talk.
I hope they stayed for the 2 hours.
Yeah, I think they have. But I think what that does is now you have a conversation like that 2 hours in, where if it was a 20-minute conversation that happened in there, people aren't going to be as engaged for that to really penetrate and really to go in and to have trust. What we did for 2 hours is built up trust in what we said, and saying some things that they agreed and didn't disagree with, or agreed and disagreed with, and bounce it back and kind of showed that we're fallible too. And then those things come out. That's what I found over the last couple of years of really big growth I've had. It's nothing new. It's just something that I never allowed to take in. Like I said it earlier, like, oh, I'm too smart for these cliches. Those don't apply to me. And just to have it come at the 2.5 hour mark of a podcast that I'm really into, and I really respect what these people are saying. I agree with everything they said up until that point, and they say that, and it hits you different. And I've had so many times where it's the same cliche I've heard a million times before, but for some reason, because I was put into that state because of everything that happened before it, I was able to really let it in. And I feel like that is also going back to that idea of bringing in the politics. I feel like that couple hours of letting somebody in, that long form, I feel like it's a different level of communication. I feel like that's always how you communicate. As soon as, these phones came out, we don't do a lot of, like, how often do you sit down, put your phone away, and have a conversation for 2 hours with someone like that with no interruptions?
My God, never. This is like probably the longest I've went with.
Right? But I find it so enjoyable and so refreshing. I feel like every time I finish, it's like a reset, and you don't realize you're missing that. And there's so much magic that happens in long form discussion like that, and long form conversation, that we don't realize, because we don't have it every once in a while, even to get a taste of it. We don't know we're missing it. So when I found podcasts, I was absolutely, I'm probably still a little bit addicted, but I went full on. I was listening to nothing but just podcast, because I was so desperate for that type of conversation. It was stuff that I wanted to have all the time. Like, I love talking with people, but there's always something that comes up, your phone rings, work calls, or you got to go do something. You never can do that. To have now something where I know I can sit down and have that week after week and really grow from it and try and learn from it, I found it's just, I don't know. I feel like a whole different person since I started this, and just that being able to learn from people week after week and just come into it with an open mind of, I hope I get my mind changed today. It's so exciting to be able to know that I'm going to sit down with someone I respect and test some ideas and learn some shit. Like, I feel like there's so much magic to it, and people are starting to come around to it because they see the $100 million deals with Spotify and stuff with Rogan, and that, because now that speaks their language. Oh, that's $100 million. Oh, I know what that means, right? But they didn't. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, and we have no idea what is coming behind it. And it's not going to be just podcasts. I think it's YouTube. I think it's anything where somebody can put unfiltered content out to somebody that is what they want them to see. It doesn't go through producers. It doesn't go through all this stuff. Doesn't, go through the CDC.
It's just an open conversation.
Just an open conversation. You can say fuck. You can say shit. We can talk what we want to talk. It doesn't matter. It's just a conversation.
That should have been in the rules at the beginning. It would have been a different conversation.
There we go. There you go. Sorry, I should have. Yeah, actually, it's a really good point. I should say that at the start. But it's one of those things where, I feel like we're going to see a huge wave of things like that coming. And I feel like that is what we're seeing right now is the side effects of it. You see channel or cable news after Trump got out, they're just absolutely swirling the toilet like they were before Trump. That was the thing that saved them all. And that's why they ramped up all this politics, is because these media systems that were absolutely dying before Trump comes in, now they're making all this money hand over foot, or whatever that saying is. And now we're seeing the decline of it because people don't want produced bullshit that they know is untrue. They know even if it is true, it's got your own spin, it's got your own lean. People don't want that. They get enough. Some people do.
Well, and the problem is people's attention span keeps diminishing.
Right.
But rapidly. So you have to find stuff that keeps that lasting engagement.
Right.
And I'm worried you won't find it with me on this one, but hopefully you get better people on these.
I think you'll be surprised. I think that's what everybody thinks. And it's something about that conversation once you get in, and usually it's in the truck or something. You're driving somewhere, and that's what it is. It's just you and them, and it's the intimacy of this conversation, because we're talking like we would talk if the mics were here. We're making the same points, like we're defending that stuff. I think that happens. I usually first 10-15 minutes of a conversation, it's not that, but after a certain amount of time, that falls off, and we're just bullshitting, and that is recognizable. I feel like humans are so good at recognizing bullshit and recognizing authenticity. It's one of our biggest
human lie detectors. I guarantee you 100%.
Exactly. It's one of the biggest things we have. So you can turn on news and you might not know why it's false, but you have that feeling this isn't true. This is not what this person feels. There's some sort of thing coming out of it. But when they turn on podcasts or something, if they're doing it right, and if it is actually genuine, there's lots of podcasts that are not that genuine. They have angles and they're trying to do this too. They're just trying to make a buck. Very similar to the politicians that get into it to make a buck and get into it to change the world. The same thing with podcasts, but you can sniff it out in a hurry, right? And those podcasts fail because they can tell, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, this is
created.
Yeah, this isn't a genuine conversation. I feel like the magic of that hasn't fully been tapped into yet. I feel like it's going to take over all these places, right? And I feel like you see it now. Let's take hockey. Hockey's its growth has been on a kind of steady curve with all the other major sports. Hasn't changed much. Spit and Chicklets, I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah.
Paul Bissonnette, that has absolutely changed the face of what hockey is now. Their audience is almost rivals the NHL's audience on a given night, right? Like, it is absolutely amazing, and it's flipped the game on its head. Now you see 31 Thoughts and all these, everybody on the panel has a podcast and all this stuff because they see the power of it. Yeah. But until that happened, they didn't realize that was missing. They didn't realize there was this whole market of people. You see it in all these other industries. Every sport has this happening. Basketball has this happening. It started with comedians, stand-up comedy, right? That's what they have. It's this genuine look behind the curtain of whatever that is, right? I think politics is it's going to be a huge wave of this, but I think we see it in all these other areas. It's something about it's something you're passionate about. Like I love esports, right? Like, this League of Legends, it's a video game and it's these pros that play it and they get paid millions of dollars to do it. And I know it's silly, but I enjoy it. And I get a kick out of it. And to then get to listen to a podcast where you get to see the behind the scenes of all what goes into building a team, what kind of training regimes do they have, all this stuff, the broadcasters, you get a look behind it. It makes your enjoyment so much more. And I feel like it's just this added level where you take any product or any sport or anything it is, and you add that layer of genuine openness to it. And it just brings it to the next level and brings in a whole different audience that is desperate for that. I feel like we, for so long, just took it at face value that what we were offering, like just to use the NHL for example, that we were filling all the boxes. There's no, people aren't desperate for more hockey, right? Like we tried it, but there's nothing more. We've fully, the hockey ecosystem is fully satisfied. We didn't recognize there's this huge hunger for this other piece of it that we didn't realize, right?
And I think what it is it comes down to the simple that people are looking for a different conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're looking for a different conversation. They're looking for something a little more real. They're looking for something a little more impactful. They're looking for something that they can relate to. Like, you want to watch some of the most boringest stuff in the world. Watch what's going on in the legislature when they got live TV there, whatever else. They're trying to tap into social media and the legislature's live and you go whatever else. Jesus, you can watch that for about 2 minutes and you're lucky if you can make it 20 seconds. So, people are looking for a different conversation. They're looking for something that they can relate to. And I think that's part of the problem too, getting back to the politics thing or whatever it is. These people at this other level forget to be relatable. And there becomes this bigger disconnect because I'm not that person. Right. And we have to recognize what we are. The guy's still a dad. The lady's still a mom. She's, they're still just because they're a successful business person doesn't mean they don't like to drink a beer and sit on the deck and bullshit with their buddies and play poker, right? Yeah. And we forget that we're all the same. We just took different paths or we're on different points of the paths. We need to, I think that as a world, that's what we're struggling with. We're struggle with the connection. We forget that we have to connect to people. Like COVID's a prime example, right? You know, the people that struggled the most with COVID, I guarantee, are the people that were least connected to everything. Right. You need to stay connected. And so, you know, COVID made it more difficult to connect for sure. And we had to find new mechanisms to do that. I got a good buddy there, Darren Marcoux, down in the States or whatever else. And we FaceTime. Yeah, we haven't fucking FaceTime ever, right? But you started to do that, and you just did it because, like, oh Christ, I was tired of looking at my wall or watching the same Modern Family episode there with Taylor or whatever else. I was looking for something different. Yeah, and you have to. I think that's part of the problem. There is that between texting and social media and scrolling and moving my finger up and down, I lose some of that connection. Yeah. So you know, podcasts do have that ability there to start to make things a little bit more relatable and recreate that connection. But I think whether it's politics or whether it's sports or whether it's celebrities, because I honestly think too, celebrities and entertainers are going to have to reinvent themselves after COVID, because, you know, their business model, their whole idea and stuff has changed. Right. And because, like any successful relationship requires effort on a consistent basis. Right. And if you want to be successful, you got to keep doing that. Well, these people have lost that relationship with a big part of their base. Yeah. It's going to be hard to get it back, that they're going to have to reinvent themselves. And it's going to be exciting to see what happens in the next 12 months with some of that stuff. And I think we're already seeing it. This is the perfect point to prove my earlier point of, you know, there's people that get into it for different reasons. You see all these actresses and actors right now that are seeing, oh man, there's lots of money in podcasts. So you see somebody hop into it for the wrong reasons. They try and start a podcast that kind of flops because they've gone their whole life not being genuine, you know, portraying other people's words. They're very scared to let those walls down and show who they are, right? And they don't do well, and they don't know why it doesn't do well, because I check all the boxes. I have a good following going in. I'm doing the podcast. I have good production value. Why is this not working? But then you see Dax Shepard start his podcast, and he was very genuine from the start and very open and talks about his drug and alcohol problems. And it is very, and he makes way more money than he ever did acting doing his podcast right now. People know who he is because he did it right. And you see that. And I think that is what people are going to see coming up is that worth it to me? Because there's definitely a cost to that too. Being that open and letting people into that degree there's a cost to it too. And I've had to think about this. If, you know, this podcast blew up tomorrow and there's a million people listening to it, that is I've shared some very intimate stuff on this. I've talked about, you know, and I'm okay with that. And I've done that, but I have to be now conscious about, you know, my girlfriend. She didn't sign up to have her shit out there, right? My parents, my family, all that stuff. And I've had to ask those questions and have those conversations with them. Like, are you okay with this? And I try to be very cognizant of that and to be aware of that as I'm talking in the moments that I don't, but also be open and be genuine and to have the conversation. So I think it's definitely not something that doesn't come without a cost. And I think people think that they can do that. They can not be open, not be genuine, and still have all the benefits of it. But those two things are hand in hand. You need one for the other, and you have to pay that piper to have that kind of success with it and to have people really. Well, and if you want people to come in, you got to let them in, right? And you got to open up. So
100%.
I agree with you.
Yeah. The one last thing I didn't cover that I didn't know if you want to talk about it or not, but the whole Pat Wren situation there. I talked with Taylor Kellum on the podcast all about it. I honestly had no idea he even existed. I didn't know who our MLA was. I didn't know any of that stuff. And just before everything kicked off, me and Ingo just had a conversation kind of randomly, and he was telling me, kind of breaking down about it. And then the next day, your guys' letter came out, and it was just kind of serendipity that he had kind of filled me in on that. And I was blown away. I didn't know any of this was happening. I didn't know kind of what it was. And I knew that if it was at the point where you guys were speaking up, because I know the council and know yourself, I knew it had to be pretty serious for you guys to take that step. So how was that experience like? If you want to talk about it, what came of it? Do you regret anything throughout that whole process? Do you wish anything would have went differently? And how is it sitting right now?
It's like one of those things I look over my shoulder.
Yeah, you kind of forgot about. Yeah, that's why I didn't even know if I wanted to bring it up, because so much other stuff we could talk about.
It was crazy there that the amount of calls and stuff that we got about it, whatever else, and like people too, like in media and politics that have said like this is mind blowing, like this has never ever happened. Yeah, nobody's ever called out their MLA. Nobody's ever gone politically and said very vocally, very open, like you suck at your job and you need to get out of it. And that's kind of how we went. In fairness, going back to that internal thing, I have a responsibility and an obligation to myself, but I have this responsibility to 7,000 people to do a good job.
Yeah.
And so in order for me to do a good job, I need help. I'm a big part, and, you need to work with the people around you, the teams around you, and the communities around you, and so on and so forth. And so municipalities are very much rely on the provincial government. Like
Right.
we don't really succeed without them. And so I only have one person that represents me at that level. And so I've got this person that, really wasn't from this area, but came in, said they were going to do all these things and do whatever, and then just kind of disappeared, and then just kind of stopped ignoring us and whatever else. And so now I have a responsibility to make sure I do my job. And so in my job, I told Pat to his face that I was not happy with him. I put stuff in writing. I included my neighbors, members of our council met with him, and he still didn't do anything. Well, all of a sudden, all my boxes are checked. I did everything.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Pulled every lever.
Next step is let's try this other level.
Yeah,
This other lever here, and we're going to pull on that one and see what happens. Yeah. And when you have someone that's kind of disengaged and not relevant, not present, the best thing is they're not present. When somebody's not present, you have nothing to lose by telling him to either be present or move on. And that's all we were doing. Yeah. So, he's still here. He's still our MLA. The province has taken some steps to recognize that, what we said had value in it, and what we said had, truth in it. Our residents really rallied behind what we did.
That was the most, I don't know what the right word, beautiful thing is, like seeing how positive the response was to that and how much support. Usually you could say, hey, everybody gets free ice cream, and there's going to be some people talking shit about it and, that's a bad idea. But
I don't think so. Free ice cream is a pretty...
I know, but to make the example, right, there's always going to be those people that have something to say about it. But it seemed like it was pretty unanimous that everybody felt this same way about it.
I think everybody was fed up, right? And it become, it wasn't because the person was doing a good job or a bad job. It was the person wasn't doing a bad job. Yeah. Right. And so I think it was easy for everyone to rally behind that. So, I think that person, in Pat's defense, I think he stepped up and he's trying to do his job now. But in fairness, like it's too late. And now that you're not even in this party that actually can make decisions, we literally, no offense, we have no power now. So, I think we have more power now as a municipality for making a bold move and doing whatever and having those discussions and creating those relationships with the province. And the province recognizes, whoa, we got a problem here. We screwed up here, whatever else. And they're putting more attention on us than they ever have. I think we're further ahead than we were when he got elected. That being said, it's unfortunate that that's the experience Pat had to go through, but Pat created that experience for himself. So, and at the end of the day, I did what I thought was best based on the information I had at the time. I would do. Yeah. I wouldn't do anything differently. No. I don't regret nothing. I don't think it was that bad of a thing. I don't think it was that big of a thing by telling somebody that we elected to do their job. So
fucking right. I think we need more of that. And that's why I was so excited about it, right? Because I feel like there's probably a lot of times where that should have happened. And just because that the fear of the unknown or whatever, that step wasn't taken, and we just wrote it out to the end of the term, and then it happened. I'm sure there's 15 ridings across Canada that's happening right now, but nobody's saying anything because they don't want to be that squeaky wheel.
Likely it's more than 15.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that. But I think there's power in that to know. And I feel like that makes me feel proud of the community that we have and the people that we elect into these positions, the council and yourself that we have, that you wouldn't be afraid to make that move. Right. I feel like in talking about that, we need to add more risk back in. And I think we need to understand that people that are willing to take those risks to do the right thing are the people we want in the jobs. We don't want that person that's just going to walk the line, say, just have their finger up in the air and just follow the wind wherever it goes and just do that. You want somebody that's willing to, if they believe in it, they're going to take those risks and take those swings because you need to, or else you're going to be left behind. And I think that was awesome to see from it, right? Just that support that you guys had for it and how well it all turned out. It sounds like, because like you say, you have a better outcome.
I don't think we're further behind. The one thing I will say, though, to anybody who might be listening to this and thinking, hey, should we do this or whatever else? I will say that, one, I think we did the right thing because we did all the other things before we got to that. That's so make sure that you're doing that point. Yeah. And I respect that we had another municipality we were working with and kind of, going down that path, and they were talking about doing the same thing. And when they looked inside, they said, you know what, we could have done a better job to set a different expectation from the get-go. And we're not where you're at. And I respect that.
For sure.
I respect that for happening. Yeah. The other thing is that we never went to throw tomatoes. We never went to be derogatory or name calling or drag someone through the mud. It was like, this is what you were supposed to do and this is what you didn't do. And we focused on that. We didn't start talking about province. We didn't start talking about politics. We were accountable to the person we were talking to about the expectations that we both agreed upon when we started. And I think staying there, I think that's where we got some of the support or whatever else. I think that's where our council, and I tried to make it. It wasn't about media. It's not about a publicity stunt. It's not about Slave Lake. It's just about, hey, like, listen, you said you were going to do something, you didn't do it, so step up and do it. So, I would encourage anybody that's going to go down that path that make sure you stay at that level.
And that's what I really appreciated about how you guys went about things. It was respectful. You made remarks towards that you had tried other things. You showed people like, hey, we pulled these other levers and this is what we're doing now. It was very apparent that it wasn't a publicity stunt. And I felt like all that together when I read that letter and just having that little bit of a fill in from Ingo of what the situation was, I was so excited because I feel like so rarely for myself being such an anti-politics guy of just, I'm such a nihilist in that whole domain, for me to see an action be taken through government that would be exactly what I would do in that position. I feel like that never happens. I feel like that happens once every 10 years where I see a situation handled almost exactly how I would have, because I feel like just the way the system's set up, it doesn't allow for that a lot. I was very happy and very proud of the community and who we have in that position. And I just want to say, thank you for that, because that was an awesome thing to see. And I feel like if more people were bold enough to make those kind of moves and wise enough to do them in that way where they don't ruffle any feather that doesn't need to be ruffled and have tried every option first, I feel like if every government ran that way, everybody would be better off. So thank you for that. And it
was a whole team that made that decision.
Team,
it wasn't just me. It was our whole council that rallied behind that. And so appreciate the support. And more than anything is just, I continue to feel like Slave Lake is one of the greatest places in the world. I love living here.
Yeah.
And I will, as be a strong ambassador as long as people will have me, or I got the energy to do it.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that we're a progressive group. We want change. We want to make things better, and we just want to surround ourselves and work with people that want the same thing. So,
awesome.
What's even better is that we have a whole community of people that just think the same way. And in a lot of ways, I think it's the Albertan way.
Yeah.
And so it's a great place to be. And I just appreciate the community continuing to support us and how we do our business and how we do politics and recognize that we are humans. And it's a great place to be.
Yeah, it is. And I think that is all a beautiful way to wrap it up here. Unless there's anything we missed, is there anything that we didn't cover? Anything that people need to know about? Anything big on the horizon coming up, or do we pretty much wrap her?
No, I guess, one thing that I would say from an Albertan perspective here, for anyone that's listening, this fall, municipal elections across the province. So every single, from the city of Edmonton, Calgary to the smallest town or village or whatever else, it's election season. And so if you ever really wanted to make change, this is your opportunity to do that. And if you're not willing to stick your neck out there and do that job, that's okay. But spend some time to figure out who the best person is and rally around that. And if you really want to make change, don't just go out and vote for that person. Go out and support that person and carry that person's conversation through your community and continue to support and work with that person beyond that. Because that's our responsibility as a voter. Our responsibility isn't just to go vote. Our responsibility is to check in, be informed, share our opinion, share our information. And when the election's all over, we need to continue to do all those things. And so, I would just say, now's the time. Yeah, now's the time. And no election is going to impact you like the one that's most that's in your backyard, right? That is where the real rubber hits the road, and you've got to take that as important. I feel like there's so much emphasis put on federal elections and stuff when. Well, municipal's where it all starts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So definitely that is a beautiful way to say it. I think that's exactly what it is. People are so, you give them an easy out where, I can vote for you, and that's about the extent of work I have to put in. They're going to take that. But I think there is a lot of merit to taking it that step further, like you say, and finding that person, do a little bit of research and help them help you. Right? If you don't help them get in there, and stay checked in afterwards, right?
Exactly.
You have to
Yes,
stay
very.
informed or whatever else. If you're not happy with how the situation is, but you haven't been listening to the conversation, you know, you need to, going back there, you need to look internally there and say, okay, what do I need to do differently? And so I think politicians need to up their game for sure. I think we need to do a better job communicating. I think we need to do better job connecting with the people that were there. But, you know, on the other side, we need voters to come connect with us as well. And that relationship that effort in that relationship has to continue on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. I think that's perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me, Tyler. That was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I think people are going to really get some good insights out of this episode. So
thanks for having me, Nick. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would be here this long. And I just, you know, I hope that, you know, even 1% of some of the stuff we talk about has an impact on other people because, you know, if you're going to spend the time to do it, take something away from it.
And I think it will. And I think this is the medium itself, not even to give myself the credit. I think it's just the medium itself. That's what I believe in. That's why I'm chasing this. I think that's exactly what it will do. And I think there will be definitely some people impacted. And the fun thing is it lives on the internet and people can go back to it. And there's going to be people that find it in 2 years and learn a really deep lesson from it. And there's going to be people that find it in 5 years. And that's what's exciting about this stuff is you leave these little lessons like that and truthful, and probably the same lesson's going to come up with a bunch of different people, but it's just that match of me and you. Somebody's going to connect with the conversation between me and you, right? And maybe this idea has been brought up on the podcast 20 times over time, but it took that conversation between me and you for it to hit. And that's what's special about me and gets me excited. So thank you for being here. I think it is very meaningful.
Thanks for having me and best of luck, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. All right, what an episode. I really enjoyed sitting down with Tyler. I'm hoping that we can do it again in the future. Things like this really get me excited. I don't know if maybe before the next election or something, if he wants to come and bring his platform forward and have a conversation about it or something like that, or who knows. I'm sure I'll be sitting down with lots of these people that have been on the podcast once. I think it's the initial fear and nervousness about it is kind of one of those things. And then I've found that after that, people are pretty open to coming back on because, like I said, I think people have a pretty good time. It's a bit intimidating when you start, but once you get into it, it's pretty fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Some really good Slave Lake episodes coming as well. I hope you guys are all doing well. I know things are tough out there still. Weather's getting warmer, days getting longer, things are looking up. I think there's going to be a huge push to really bring things open. You know, vaccines are getting out there. That was their big pillar of holding back everything else. So the excuses are falling away, and I think we'll be able to do a little bit more things here soon. So hold on, you guys got this. We're all stronger than we think, and it's all gonna be great. Thank you guys all. Like I said, I got to always give a big thank you every once in a while to you guys for listening, because you're the ones that make this possible. If nobody listens to this, there's no point in me doing it. And it allows me to get so much better at something I love, which is podcasting, but it also allows me to be better in all other areas of my life by doing this. I learned so much in each of these conversations from each of these people, and it's very valuable, and I really appreciate it. So thank you guys all for being here along this ride with me, and see you on the next one. Some really good ones coming. Bye.